I'd like to begin by taking a moment of silence to remember those that have fallen since the last time we met. Okay, thank you. On the agenda, the first item of business is the change from doing the paperless board meeting training prior to the approval of the minutes. And I'll turn it over to Steve to explain a couple of the changes that we will be implementing here at this meeting.
All right. I know Tim and Tammy have already been talking with you guys as you checked in, getting you your iPads. And this, as you'll recall from our last meeting, this will be the first meeting where we are changing the way you guys are doing business, moving to a paperless environment. And there's going to be a couple of things to go along with that. For today's meeting, Tim and Tammy will be doing the training. And then also I want to make sure, make you guys aware, the audio archives of the meeting now will be collected, and those will be, we'll begin putting those out on the web. So in the future, for this meeting and future meetings, the audio of the meetings will be out on the board's website following the meeting. And then, at least initially, I wanted to, let you guys know what you say. It's out there for posterity. But beginning, it'll be audio for the entire meeting. In the future, we'll be able to parse that out so that you'll be able to match the audio to the agenda items specifically on the website. So that's one of the website improvements that Tammy and the team have been working on implementing. Today, we've got the beginning of the paperless training, and with that, turn it over to Tim.
Thank you, Steve. For the record, Tim Valencia, Deputy Director for the LEOFF 2 Board. As Steve said, this is our initial training as we're transitioning into our paperless board meeting solution. This idea is largely in response to requests by many of the board members, in particular during last year's expectation interviews. So we've worked very hard to get this implemented. In particular, the staff has put out a real team effort to make sure this has come to fruition. So I appreciate all of their hard work in this. So two things that we're going to go through. First is just using an iPad. And then second, we'll actually go to the paperless meeting solution, which is the product specifically is from Novus Agenda. So as far as, let's start with using an iPad. Now, is this an experienced user group? Because I know I was not an experienced user group. Are people, how everybody here, everybody else familiar with them, or we have some rookies in there? Okay. The good news is I had never really touched an iPad before this last week, and so I've had a crash course in putting all this together, so it's pretty much written to that level. Now, this presentation and along with another document will be available to you as well. So we'll go through this and we'll actually do some of the work online as we're going. If you need help, Tammy's available, Ryan's available. If something's not working correctly, flag one of them down and they'll help you out. So here's what we're going to look at. We're going to talk about just the basic usage of a unit, just getting started. We're going to change your passcode on it, because we've given you all generic passcodes. You'll want to have your own private passcode. And we'll talk about navigation on the unit, some basic features of the unit, and the applications that are on there, some tips for using it, and what you're going to do if you have problems and we need to troubleshoot at some point when you're using your iPad. So basic use, and I'm going to ask you to go ahead and do this with me so that you're learning as we go. First thing you got to do is turn them on if you haven't already, or if you don't know how. The power button is in the upper right-hand corner of your iPad. You need to press and hold that button. It'll probably be about 3 seconds. And what you will see, just press and hold it, you'll see the white Apple icon appear in the middle of the screen. Once that appears, you can let go and it will go through its power up process. Now, once it is powered up, it should automatically go to your initial passcode screen. Has everybody reached the passcode screen that's up right now? All good? Okay. So to access into here, you need to enter in your 4-digit passcode. You should have had a slip of paper in with your iPad that has your 4-digit code. So please enter in your 4-digit code now. And as soon as you've entered that in, that should automatically take you to your home, I call it your home screen, so to speak. Now, a couple of notes here, just on the iPad itself. This is a touch-based device, so it's what they call a multi-touch interface. That means everything's going to be done by some form of touching the unit. So common features which you may be familiar with from other technology applications are tapping on items, much like you would do a mouse click, but you'll use your finger to tap on an item. They have what's called a pinch. There's which is literally like a zoom type feature. You can pinch in or you can pinch out using 2 fingers touching the screen. So in most cases, a pinch in will zoom in on a screen, or you can zoom out with an out zoom. So that's a 2-finger. There's also a 4-finger. So if you have 4 fingers touching the screen and you pinch in, that's how you can close an application that you may have up on your screen. So those are the 2 of the common features. One of the other things that you can do is what's called swiping. So if you want to move, there's multiple screens basically in here. It's not just one fixed screen. You can swipe left and right, up and down to get to varying screens or features. And at this point, you only have the one face screen. So if you tried to pull left, you just put a finger down and try and pull left. You'll see all your icons start to move. You don't have anything on some of the other screens, and you'll get to a point where you'll learn, or maybe you want to put some things on those other screens. That's how you would scroll over to some of these screens, is by this swipe type feature. So you'll hear me say that. Yeah. So in some cases with the tap, sometimes it'll have to be a double tap, so just 2 rapid successions like you would a double click with a mouse. So those are all the basic navigations, but again, it's all touch features. So as far as the external unit itself, your basic features here, we've already looked at the power button. Just around the corner from the power button, now in this case, I'm looking at mine in this upright fashion like it's shown on the screen. On that upper right-hand corner, there's a little round slide button that in the up position is your volume is enabled. If you slide that little button down, that will mute your volume. That's just an easy way to just put it into silent mode. Just a little tiny button there, you just slide up and down. Right below that is your volume button. And there it's a kind of a rocker type button. Of course, if you press and hold it, the up side, your volume will go up. If you press the down side, your volume will go down. If you press and hold the down side, that will also take your unit all the way to mute. Okay. A couple other features to be aware of. Down at the very bottom of your iPad, on the black border, you'll see a little round button with a little white square in it. And that's called your home button. Okay. Anytime you press the home button, that's going to should bring you back to this view here. So that's kind of your reset button, if you will. So you'll hear us refer or use the home button in many instances. You'll hear us talk about the dock. The dock is this area at the bottom of your screen. In your case, I think you should have 3 applications, or maybe it's 4 applications, but you'll have a few applications. I think we put your 3 key applications down here at the bottom. These, no matter if you're scrolling between screens, your dock is always going to stay the same. It's always that's there for your most frequently used or key applications, so they're always readily available. Versus the ones on the screen itself may move or as you're going in between different locations. The last piece to know about is where you need to charge your unit. In particular, you want to make sure before you come into a meeting that your unit is fully charged. There is a power cord in the boxes that your units came with. The plug-in is at the bottom of the screen here. So that's where your power plug-in is at. Okay. So we're going to get a little practice with the basic navigation stuff here. The first thing we want to do is change your passcode. Okay. So you can follow along here up on the screen, and actually you can do it on your screen as we're going. The first step is I want you to find the settings icon. I've circled what it looks like here. It's kind of a set of gears, and that should be on your home screen there somewhere. Go ahead and tap that with a single press. And this should take you then to the settings screen, which is the screen over to the right under number 2. Okay? So the next thing that you want to press is right here about on the right side of the screen, about in the middle, where it says passcode lock. If everybody would press that. And what you should get is that passcode pop-up. We got everybody there? Good on that side, Ryan? Okay. So what I want you to do is enter in your passcode again. And now you're going to go to the passcode lock screen, which is here under number 4. And I want you to go near the top of the right panel and press Change Passcode. And once again, step 5, now re-enter your passcode. Now it's going to ask you here under number 6 to enter a new passcode. So pick whatever new passcode you want. Enter that code in, and of course remember it. If you need to make your note on your sheet to remember that, please do so. And then it's going to ask you, once you've entered that new passcode, it's going to ask you to re-enter your passcode. So go ahead and re-enter your new passcode. Once you've done that, after just a moment, it's going to, that box will fade out. It will return back to that passcode screen, but your passcode is now changed. Now, if you go down to the home screen or the home button at the bottom and press that once, it'll return you back out to your main screen. Still got everybody? Perfect. So I think you'll find, as I have found, if you haven't used one of these before, it comes real quickly with just a little bit of use. I want to show you one more feature that you may not end up using a lot, but just so you know that it's aware, they have what's called the multitask bar. And that will pop up from the bottom of your screen, and there's 2 different ways to access the multitask bar. One is a swipe, but you have to use 4 fingers. So if you use 4 fingers, start from the bottom of the screen and just do a swipe up motion, you'll see that your screen will kind of slide up and reveal what they call the multitask bar. The other way to access it is just to double press your home button. If you press it twice, it will also pop up your multitask bar. So this is going to be a location where if you have multiple applications open, you can quickly go down if you want to move in between your open applications, because this will show you everything that you have open at a given time. So it's a really easy way to navigate and manage through your applications. Again, if you want to close that, you can just swipe down with 4 fingers or just press your home key, and that'll move out. The time you may go to that multitask bar is if you want to close out your applications. We'll show you an example of how you can do that here as part of the demonstration. But first I want to talk now about your applications that are on your iPad. We've pre-configured almost everything on your iPads. We have all your key applications on there. Depending on your personal use needs, or maybe some additional configuration staff needs to do, depending on how you intend to use your machine and how level of complexity you want to use with it. But for the most part, we have done all the pre-configurations. We've tried to move stuff out of the way that you probably will not use, and make convenient the things that you will use. The three things that you will probably be using the most on your iPad from the left two board are the three applications that we have put down in the dock at the bottom of the screen. The first one is your Novus Agenda, which of course is our paperless board meeting solution. So that you'll be using every time you come to the board meeting, for a meeting, or prior to a meeting if you want to, when you want to review the materials for the upcoming meeting, or anytime you want to do some research on a prior meeting. The second key document is the middle one, which is green. This is called the Good Reader. This is basically a document storage location. What we've done is we've put out, or we've loaded that, and I'll show you an example of this, with a lot of key documents that you will want in forms, publications. So it's a place where you'll have easy access to them. So things that are in here will have a copy of the AVR, there'll be copies of the newsletter, there'll be your trustee expense forms, the orientation manual, all these documents that you may need to access, those will be in the Good Reader. So you'll have that for handy access to a lot of your key documents. The third item is just the left to web page. So anytime that you want to go out to the website, you'll be able to click on that last, or tap on that last item, and that will take you to the agency's web page. So I mentioned the Good Reader. So one thing I want everybody to get a chance to see this. If you would, from your home screen, go ahead and tap on a single tap on the Good Reader application in your dock. And where that should take you is the screen. This is the Good Reader screen that is up. We got everybody at the Good Reader screen now? Close? Almost, Tammy? All right. So, some things to note here on the Good Reader screen. On the left side of the screen under My Documents, you will see a whole list of documents that we have already preloaded for you on the machine. As you can see, the operating policies are here, information about your travel, your expense records, the board meeting calendar, your pre-approved trustee list, the annual the actuarial valuation, the last dual response that was published. We have a trifold, informational trifold that we use when we're out talking with stakeholders. You have the board's information about the board staff and our positions. We've also developed a demographics information. I know sometimes you'll get questions about demographics of the plan, so we've preloaded a document out there that you have access to, and your travel expense record as well. So those are documents, and at times we may be updating documents. For example, this presentation we're going to upload along with another quick usage document. We're going to load those. I think that one's already loaded. So the way that you would get new documents is you will press the sync button. Now on the right side of the screen, under this web downloads bar, you'll see this sync button. All you need to do is press that button. So if you would do that now, that should sync up, and you should see a new document appear, which I think is the usage document. Now, one thing that I did fail to mention, of course, all your iPads are wireless enabled. So, of course, anytime that you're going to try and sync your documents, if you're going to try and go into Novus Agenda to look up the information, you do have to be connected to the internet through a wireless data connection. If you don't have a data connection at home, then you talk with staff, and we have some solutions to be able to help you with that. But at any point that if you want to look up, you need to be connected through a wireless point. We have installed a wireless point here for the board, so that's why they're wireless enabled here and in the office and throughout the building. So you'll always have it, and it'll automatically sync up as soon as you come in the building. So you'll always have it accessed here. But certainly, if you need any assistance using it either in your home or workspace, if you don't have wireless, just contact staff and we'll be able to help you out. Okay, so did everybody sync up okay? Ryan, Tammy? Okay, good. So that's your good reader. So, and any time that we do put something new out there, we will send a notification out to you that you'll need to sync your good reader to be able to access the new information. But just some other basic applications that you may very well use. And these are all just up on the main part of your home screen. If you want to, here's a good test. If you want to get out of your good reader, this is an opportunity where you can either press the home button, or if you want to do the four-fingered pinch in, if you put the four fingers on and squeeze it together, you'll see that will close that good reader down. It's like minimizing it. It will close it. It's not turning it off. It's just closing it and hiding it down in your multitask bar. And again, the other, like I said, if you want, if you press the home key, that'll also get you back there. So now back out at the main screen, the three key applications I wanted to point out here. The first one is Safari. It looks like a compass. That'll be here somewhere on your screen. What Safari is, that's the web browser in the Apple world. So if you're used to Internet Explorer, this is the Apple equivalent. So Safari, if you wanted to go out to the web and search for something, you could launch Safari and then use that like you would any other browser. The other item is that we've preloaded contact information. So there's a contacts one here. It says brown icon. And that has all the contact information for all the board members and all the staff. So it's a quick, easy way for you to find the contacts. The last one I will point out is the calendar, which this one in the upper side. That one we have put out. We've loaded with the board meeting dates or any dates relevant to board activity. Okay. So almost done with the basic usage stuff. So here's just some usage tips. You may hit a point where if an application just stops responding, if your machine freezes up, and if you press home key and it won't do anything, that if you double press the home key, and if you go ahead and double press your home key, that'll bring up that multitask bar, or you could have swiped up to get to your task bar. You'll see you have some applications probably open down at the bottom. If you press and hold one of the applications, so like you have Good Reader there, press and hold the application for a few seconds, and you'll see what it'll start to wiggle or shake, and you'll see that there'll be a little red dot with a minus sign through it appear on the left-hand corner while it's doing that. All you have to do, if you tap on that little red dot with the minus sign on it, that will close that application. And then you could close any of the other applications you want to. But that's how you would force close an application if it goes bad. And then again, you can just home key back or swipe down just to go back to your desktop. I already mentioned the mute volume button on that upper right-hand side. So again, if you slide the button down, that will mute, and you'll see a little bell will show up with a cross through it. or you can just hold the volume button down. For a hard boot, if the whole iPod or iPad becomes it just doesn't keep responding, what you'll need to do is hold the power button and the home button, press them at the same time, and hold them, and it'll be about 10 seconds. Ignore it when it comes up with the shutdown slide, and what it will then go back to that black screen with the Apple logo. That's when it has started to reboot. So you just need to press and hold those two buttons together to hard reboot your machine. So if it just freezes up. And again, I already showed you how to remove an app. At any point, if you want to remove an app, whether it's in the dock, multi-station, on your desktop, all you have to do is press and hold the icon, and you'll see all the icons will start to wiggle. Only icons that show up with a little black X in that left corner dot, those are the applications you can remove. There are some applications that you're not able to remove. But anytime that you're going to do something to modify or move an icon, and the next point is moving icon, same thing. If you get an icon into a moving status, a wiggle status, by pressing and holding it, once it's shaking, you can then grab that item and move it around your screen by dragging it with your finger. Keep a hold of it. For example, if you wanted to move it to another screen because you didn't want it on your home screen, you can drag all the way to the edge of the field of the screen, and it will automatically fly to the next screen. And now you can swipe back and forth to those applications. So all you have to do is, while it's in that wiggle mode, grab and drag it, and if you drag it to the side, it's stupid. It should go to it should go to the new screen. Anyways, so those are just some of your basic usage tips. But again, and those are only. And today I just want to stay with some of the basic stuff, so I don't want to get too out of control. But again, problems and troubleshooting. If you ever have any kind of problems or questions, just contact staff, and we will be happy to help you. Ryan is our resident millennial, is our absolute expert on the iPad, but Tammy's pretty darn good, and I'm learning. So, but definitely contact us if you have any problems. If for some reason there's a significant issue with your machine or something that we need to do to the machine, you'll just need to contact staff, and we will let you know how to get that back to us. You'll just send the device back to us. You'll just be able to mail it back to us, and we'll do whatever work we need to, and then we'll send it back to you. Or after a board meeting, you could leave it with us. So part of that process, of course, that's why you need your boxes, because you'll want to take the iPad back out of the case, put it in the box. You'll package that in appropriate packaging, and then that's what you'll end up shipping back. So that's why we provided you the box. So, but we'll be absolutely ready and prepared to help you with any problems you have or any questions. So, questions?
Is this iPad iTunes based? Do we have to sync it periodically through iTunes like you do a normal one?
No, Tammy's shaking her head no at me. So Tammy, I can grab a microphone if you want to.
It's not set up for, I can talk loud. It's not set up for iTunes. We don't have an iTunes account for the LEOFF board. We just have an Apple ID. Everybody's on the same Apple ID, and I manage that. Of course, we can talk about if you have settings or applications in your own iTunes account. We can talk about how
I just
to
wondered if
arrange
it had
that.
to be synced periodically
No.
at home.
No, there's no iCloud set up on it. So there's no iCloud set up on it, so it doesn't have to sync up.
Oh, okay.
How was it updated? The operating system?
Basically, operating systems for Apple are only updated once every 9 months to a year. And so, basically, under your settings, there'll be a little red number next to it. And so that basically means it's time for an update, but we'll let you know before then what to expect.
Yeah, anytime there's system upgrades or major changes, definitely staff will be on top of that, and we'll be communicating with you.
Will we have any kind of an email account set up with this to forward, like if somebody wants some of our documents in the good reader and you want to forward it to somebody, Are we gonna have that capacity to do that?
We'll use the same email accounts that you use now, and if your email account is internet-based, so you can log in through the Safari and then pop us an email and let us know, but we won't be setting up email accounts on here because we don't have left email accounts for each one of you.
Okay.
Was wondering how does it going to work about, right now we get emails and a packet of information with our PDF, and is that the next statement about how do we do Novus Agenda? And
That's where
how
Novus
that's gonna-
Agenda comes into place, because Novus Agenda is going to replace all of that process.
Okay.
All right. All right, again, if any other questions, pop up or information that you need, contact staff. We'll be happy to help you out.
You just would hold it down until it's done, and then you just
So next we'll talk about the using Novus. You'll be welcome to log in and roll through pieces of this. I have some different screenshots on this, like I did with the last one. I want to be able to just familiarize you with kind of how the look and the feel of the system, and then as we run through today's meeting, you'll get a better chance to, it'll at least then make sense, and you'll have a sense of what you're doing. The key thing here is for you to get the basics on what you'll be doing as a board member with the Novus Agenda system. So let's go ahead and launch your Novus, and I'll ask you to go ahead and do this. So from your home screen on your iPad, go ahead and click on your Novus Agenda, or tap on your Novus Agenda icon in your bottom left. Now that should automatically pop you into the trustee login area. So you're going to an area that is specific to the trustees. Only the trustees and staff that are administering it actually access this site. This is not the same view that public will view from the internet type based. So here again on your slip of paper there, you should have a username and a password. So if you would go ahead and enter those in. Now in this case, all you have to do is tap on the field. So like where username is, you can tap on that field and you'll see the keyboard, which I hadn't mentioned before, will automatically pop up from the bottom. And you can enter in your username. And once you've entered your username in, just tap on the passcode. And again, if you need to make that bigger, because like me, I've got fat fingers, this is where you can use your 2-finger zoom and expand it, and that will zoom in on that spot and give you a little bit more space for typing. And then tap you can tap the login button, which is the blue button, or on the keyboard there's, I believe, a go button. Either one of those should get you logged in. And where you should end up is on what we're calling the home screen for Novus in the trustee view. We got everybody there?
I did it my old one, I couldn't remember how to do it.
You good on that side, Ryan? Okay. So what you're going to see on the home view or on the home screen view is it should automatically populate with information related to upcoming meetings that we've already released into the system. So in this case, you could see that in this example, we had today's meeting already released into the system. So you have easy, ready access to it at that point. That all you would have to do, let me see where I'm at here. Yeah. So you could access information on the 724 meeting here by, all you would have to do is tap on the meeting date. And that would take you into the information for that. But before we start going into that, I'm going to press, if you press in the upper left-hand corner, there's a arrow pointing to the left. From that home screen, you'll notice that up the very top of the home screen, there's a search button. If you were to click on that search button, that would give you an opportunity to go and look for other meetings. In particular, if you were looking for a past meeting, because of course any upcoming released meetings would already be populated at the home. But if you wanted to go look at a past meeting, you could go into this search feature and you would see, so there's the search button, and where that will take you is into the search screen. And you can see there's several different fields in here that you can enter criteria in if you want to narrow down your search. You can see that under the meetings within, which is a drop down, you can do last month, the last 6 months, next 6 months, a 6-month span, or you can enter in a date range if you would like by hitting the custom dates from the drop down, and you'll have an opportunity to select for a date range if you kind of have an idea of what you were looking for. And as you can see, there's a variety of different things you can put in there, including text, because this is a searchable database based program. That text searching, like for example, if you were looking for items that were disability related, you'd be able to type in disability in the text field and find meetings that had disability items. Again, once you've entered in your criteria within this field, if you press the search button, it will then go out and search for those meetings, and it will populate much like your home screen did with all the meetings that met your criteria. That's the example that you see up on the screen right now. All right. We got everybody still? All right, excellent. So that's if you're trying to find a meeting. So you can go to the home screen when you first log in to get to the next meeting, which is often what will happen. We'll have notified you that meeting materials are available. You would log into your Novus, and then you would be able to go, you would see that next meeting available, and you'd be able to go right into that meeting. So let's talk about reviewing a meeting. So in this case, let's say we wanted to look at the 724 meeting, and since that's already populated up, that if you, at any point, if you just click on either the meeting date or the meeting type, that will take you to what is the, well, more or less, it'll say, it's kind of what we'll call a board view as far as a meeting, as far as a meeting goes. So this top image is essentially when you click on a meeting, and so this would be, for example, if you just got notified materials are available and you wanted to prepare for the upcoming meeting. You would select into that meeting and you would get this top screen, and you'll notice that everything from the agenda is on this left screen in which we're calling the navigation bar in green, and that is all the agenda items related to this meeting. Now, if you tap on a single one of those items, you'll notice that down here, what's called the cover sheet will appear. Most items will have a cover sheet that will be popular. They'll all have a cover sheet. Most of them, if not all of them, will be populated with appropriate information. Here you can get summary information about the item, so you know what it is that you're looking at. You'll note that you'll be able to find out what type of report it is, what the presentation date is, who's presenting. We'll try and provide you summaries of what the item is, so you know what it is you're looking at. And again, this year we've started adding the strategic linkage, so you know how it ties to the strategic plan. The other item to note is that down at the very bottom of this screen it says attachments. So any attachments related to this item, which you would know as the written reports that you receive from staff or strategic partners, and also the PowerPoint presentations are available there. So those will always be in a PDF type format. You can just tap on those and it will automatically launch those each individually, and you could go through and then do your review if you wanted to read the report or look over the presentation or any other handouts or materials. But any materials related to this item will have an attachment down there. If there's no attachment there, then there just simply aren't any attachments being provided for that particular item. Now, another thing you may want to do, so you've gone through and you've started doing your preparation and you're looking at some items. and let's say you hit an item that you know you want to make some comments on, or you have some information you want to capture for yourself in case you want to bring up an issue during the meeting. This has a comments feature available. Now you'll notice at the top of the page, when you're in the meeting view, you'll have varying tabs. One of those tabs is a comments tab. So the first tab was the cover sheet, which you were looking at, which is the default position. If you were to then tap on the comments tab, you would then get the comments text box. And the text box that appears, you'll notice it'll be on whatever item you're on the navigation. So if you wanted to make a comment on the DRS administrative, you would click on that item and then click on the comments tab. And then this is a rich text box, so you can then, if you just tap into that box, it will bring up the keyboard and you can type in whatever notes you want. You'll note you can bold it, underline it, highlight it, justify it any way you want. Okay? When you hit save, you'll note that what will happen is next to that item, a little bubble icon will appear. This lets you know that you made a comment here. So when you come back to this item during the board meeting, you'll know you made a comment or a note for yourself. Now, this is independent to you. You are the only one that will be able to see your comments. I will advise you that I believe what we're learning is that these comments, that what you'll want to do is have these for your meeting, make your comments, but then you'll want to delete your comments. If they stay on the record, they can be subject to a public records request. So that's the caveat with the comment. But they're there for your convenience so that you can have a reminder to yourself when you get to the meeting of something you wanted to bring up. But the key is, and there's that easy delete button there, just be able to delete every comment. So that would probably be the recommended protocol if you're using your comment features. And I see Dawn shaking her head yes. So.
And be careful what you type in.
So before a meeting, you can come out and review a meeting, review your materials. You can make comments for yourself on the materials. So that's the key things you're going to do prior to a meeting. So the next thing that's going to happen is what happens when you come to a meeting. So when you come to a meeting, you're going to launch your Novus application and you're going to log in. And you can do that as soon as you get here and you'll be ready to go. Then what will happen is that from Jessica, as the what we call the agenda clerk in this role, she will launch the meeting when Kelly starts the meeting. And you'll note in this view, you'll be back on that meeting view because you'll click into the particular meeting. And what this application does is that it will actually track along with the meeting and let you know with a highlighted bar what agenda item is currently being discussed. That's a useful feature because there may be some point where you need to either, let's say you need to leave the room, or you need to go to another application and get some information, you go to do some research on a previous meeting, and you're not, there's something else you're doing momentarily. When you come back to this meeting, you'll know exactly where we're at if we changed items because it'll be highlighted for you. Okay, so that way you'll always know where we're at. So that's the view that you can expect to see. Now, I will note, like I said, one of the reasons that you may not be looking at the current item is you may want to go look at a piece of information. Somebody says something, you go, I remember something from last month on a report, and I want to go look at that real quick. In the upper right-hand corner, next to where it says home and log off, there's this little magnifying looking type button. That's called the research button. What this allows you to do is that while you're in the current meeting, you can click on that button and it will take you into that meeting search tool, but you don't have to leave the current meeting to do that. So you can go search for the other materials, get to whatever you want, and then close those out, and you will still be in the current meeting. So that's just a handy little feature. So one of the things you do during a meeting is you're just following along, and the system does that pretty easily for you. The other thing that you will do, and you'll get to see this as well today, is voting. This system has a voting capability, which is good for accuracy and tracking it in the record. What will happen is that when a motion is made and a vote is called for, that you will see in the upper right-hand screen of your meeting view that your voting buttons will appear, and this vote sign will be flashing, indicating that it's time to vote. At that point, all you have to do is tap which button you are. If you're voting for, which is a green button. If you're voting against, it's a red button. Or if you're abstaining, then it's the black button. Then when you click that, it'll come up with, it'll change this. It'll ask you to either confirm your vote. In this case, this was an example of voting for. And then it said, do you want to confirm that for vote? Or cancel the vote, and it'll just go back to this vote so you can re-vote. Now, one of the other features on this, that what will happen during a vote is the what we call the public kiosk will show up. So on the screen here, there will be a screen that will list everybody that's voting, that's a voting member. It will also record live the votes as they occur and show during the vote. So those are disclosed to the public during the vote. You will also see that then after you have cast your vote and the vote's been closed, actually I think it's even though that, I'm not sure if it has to close or not. We'll have to check that today. But once you've cast your vote, that in the upper left of your screen, it will tell you what you voted. The green is that you voted for. It'll be a red icon if you voted against. It'll be a black icon if you voted abstain. So you will know what you did vote, just to ensure the accuracy of your vote. So some notes about what you may be doing on your machine after a meeting, because we talked about before a meeting, during a meeting, and now after. One of the features of this, of course, is that past meetings will be accessible 24/7 if you want to go look at materials or find information to review. Now, that will be starting on the Novus site with the June 19th meeting. We're going to put all that material up. Any meeting prior to June 19th, 2013 will still be on the Left 2 website, which is why you might need to access the website from the desktop. And I believe we will have June 19th loaded up no later than Friday. So you will have availability, though, to all future meetings. You'll be able to go back and find them at any point that you want for your convenience. The other thing that yes?
Tim, are you also going to be putting past meetings on? Are you slowly going to be doing some archiving of the past? Because I was just trying the search function, and I was trying to find past meetings, and there's nothing there yet.
Yeah,
so.
we don't have anything loaded up yet in terms of past. I don't think we've addressed that quite yet, whether or not. We're going to start with June 19th and get this going, and then we'll have to, then we'll address that on how we're going to be able to affect that. So part of that, as we're looking at changing our web function as well, that may take it one way or the other. So
I would, just from doing it in my own organization, the archiving would be a great resource, because on the searching function, obviously, trying to find out what we've done a year ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago would be important for me as a board member to have that available to me here. So.
Okay. Appreciate the feedback on that. The last time, because the automation of this feature, one of the nice things that it has a lot of automation into the minutes. That's going to make them easier and we anticipate quicker to capture. So a new feature that you hadn't been able to do before is that within a short time frame after the board meeting, you should be able to, we'll make available so that you can access the draft meeting minutes to review. If you want to go back and say, what did we decide on this, or what happened? Again, those are going to be in drafts. They won't be official till the following month when a vote is taken, but that accessibility is not something we've had in the past. So that is a new feature that I think is a big advantage of this system. So those are things that you may come back to the system after a meeting for. So those are the key items that I'm going to cover today, and you'll get more familiarity with it as we launch into today's meeting. So does anybody have any questions before we get started? Don?
Were we supposed to change the password?
Yeah, we actually we do. I did get a note for that we want to change the password on those. I unfortunately, I didn't build any slides for myself to do that. So I'm going to ask you to press in the upper right-hand corner. You'll see where it says Home with an underline. If you would press Home, that'll take you back to that opening home screen. And you'll notice in the upper left, it says Change Password. So a typical change password process. Go ahead and tap on that. Okay. So go ahead and enter in a password. I believe that's a new password, correct, Tammy? So enter in your new password and then confirm that password and hit save. And make sure you don't forget that one. How you doing, Jack? Good deal.
Tammy's going home with me.
What happens if you do forget?
Then you call Tammy, because we will, as administrators, will go in and do a reset process and get you started again.
In your notebook of passwords.
You're one of those two?
Yes.
All right, we got everybody changed?
Everybody's good on my side.
Steve, I see you type in there. You got it? All right.
I think that means yes.
All right. I had to interpret that real quickly for a minute there.
Meant something.
Okay, then. All right, and again, we will make this PowerPoint that I just had, we'll make that available on your good reader, and there's also the other document, which has largely the same information. If there's something that you want to go back and review, go ahead and go to your good reader, and we'll let you know once this document's loaded up as well, and you'll have to, again, go and sync up your machine. Okay? That's it? That's a
I was just
conclusion.
looking for the agenda item of long
Yeah,
silence.
I'm making sure we have this launched up here. We have this meeting launched then, Jess? The meeting's launched, is that correct? Okay, so what you will need to do now is on your Novus agenda, if you already, oh shoot. what did I do?
The yellow one.
Okay.
We just have to make sure that you go to the yellow one. And then that's what we're going to do.
So this is where you'll want to launch Novus agenda and log in.
Then we'll go to the approval of minutes next. And then they can, if this is not a view, they can view.
So from your trustee site, if you log, I would say log out of the system. Go ahead and log out, because you're under your old password still. So in that upper right-hand corner, hit log out, or tap on log out. And this should take you back to the login screen. And then log in with your new passcode or password.
Okay, so we're on approval.
And so that each of the trustees can accept the date. If they want to make a motion, they can.
And that'll take you into this initial view. And then tap on the 724 meeting.
Have a motion until after you guys say. And then the clerk will come up, Jessica will launch that. And then he's launching the kiosk right now.
We go ahead and start it.
Go ahead and start the minutes.
Yeah, this interaction of technology versus old school is just kind of slow.
It'll become quicker as we
Okay.
become a little more familiar with the mechanics of the live function.
All right, so for the benefit of the trustees here, we would entertain a motion to accept the minutes, approve the minutes of the June 19th meeting.
So moved.
I have a question about the minutes.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Okay, your question?
On the last page of the hard copy, under item 8, it talks about, in the second paragraph, Mr. Neal reviewed House Bill 1679, and then he also noted that the board may want to consider updating the, is that the 2004 employer survey or 2005 employer survey?
Okay, I gotta find you here. Hang on just a sec.
I'm not finding it either.
And number 8 is excess compensation.
I couldn't find it in the
In the minutes?
the minutes hadn't been published
Oh, I'm looking
yet.
at December 12th.
Yeah.
Oh,
All right,
I'm
hang
talk-
on.
That's what's-
I'm talking about the June 24 meeting,
June 19th meeting.
or June 19th. right.
Yeah, page 404 of our packet,
Yeah.
in the board meeting.
Hey, Ryan,
When I,
Ryan, this, on our approval of this,
It isn't
it's
on
linked to December.
It isn't on here yet,
No.
because we haven't approved it.
Okay,
There you
so
go.
it's not you then. Okay.
yeah, that's the same.
Okay, so if you can refer to your hard copy here.
Yeah. The PDF on that's linked on the agenda actually links to the December minutes, not the June minutes. So for reviewing the minutes, you'll need to look at the hard copy.
Sorry about that.
Behind tab 1, page 4, you'll see there's a typo. It says updating the 20054 employer survey. So it's either 2005 or 2004. And I believe that survey was done in 5, so we'll get that typo corrected. Thank you for catching that, Pat.
Could be planning way ahead, too.
Yeah.
Way ahead.
Yeah, that's some long-term planning right there.
Do we know what the corrected date is?
2005.
2005, okay, so if you make that correction, thank you, Pat. Okay, moved and seconded, and motion to adopt the minutes as corrected. Is there any further discussion?
All right. Now, this will be the
Okay.
your first test of the vote feature.
Seeing and hearing none,
Well,
the vote, I'm not showing it on mine.
yeah, so how does
Go
the...
ahead, well, all you have to do is at this point, you'll need to tell Jessica to open the vote.
The vote is open?
Yeah. So once you call for the vote, she will launch open the voting, similar to the House procedure.
It's on the screen.
This,
but
this,
how do we get it on?
I'm going to mention this screen. This view up here is what's called the kiosk view. It'll only show up on this particular screen, or it'll show up on the screens on your iPod, so you should be seeing your information.
Mine hasn't shown up yet. Where are we at?
I'm not sure
It
why,
shows motion here on mine, it doesn't show on yours.
I'm not sure why yours isn't loading, but we can vote for you. What's your vote?
I wanted to vote myself, I can't believe this.
I
This
know
is-
it. We'll get it fixed.
Oh, all right.
I'll do it for you.
I vote aye.
Does the chair not vote unless there's a tie?
No, the chair
No,
votes.
we
for
voted
the-
all of them.
For the board.
So
Different-
1, 2,
different from
3,
the state
4,
council.
5. We've got one unaccounted for. That's me, okay. Can you vote approved for me?
We'll get you reported.
Let's see then. And
I wasn't present at the meeting, so. Chair,
Okay, we're good.
I abstained due to the fact I was not at the meeting.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, Motion carries. Or do we have that 6? That's 6 votes, do we?
I believe we do, for all motions, you need to have a majority of the board, not just a majority of board members present.
Really?
Yeah. So you can defer that to defer approval to the next meeting.
Okay. All right, there were only 5 votes for, 1 abstention. It's not a majority of votes, so we'll defer the approval of the minutes to the August meeting.
Yes.
Donna, you just kind of following up on that?
I was following up on the chair voting since we use Reed's rules rather than Robert's
Oh,
rules.
okay.
So I was just checking.
This is much quicker, much quicker.
It will be. It will be.
All right.
Hey, look at this.
All right, so are we on the item number 4? Or I guess, no, it's item number 3. It's 4 on this
Oh, I see.
here. So the DRS administrative update, is that next?
Yes.
Okay.
Making a note on that now.
Okay.
If you want to open up the presentation, you just scroll up.
And I think everybody here knows the Director of the Department of Retirement Systems, Marcy Frost.
Good morning.
Welcome, Marcy.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, so this is your annual administrator update, and I believe this is probably my 4th year of giving this update to your team. And 4 years ago, we were talking about many of the initiatives that would be underway and several changes that were being planned for the organization. So what I'd like to do today is give you an update on those initiatives and where we're at in their implementation. And hopefully this mouse and I will get along. All right, it's not.
Got it.
You want to forward that, Jess? All right, too far. There we go. So just a quick year in review. Like I said, this was a year of building internal capacity. The management system implementation, which I will talk about in a future slide, is really about making the complexity of the organizational processes and structure, making that understandable to the team members who have to work within those processes and work within those systems. The quarterly target reviews are really attached to the management system implementation, and what that is, it's a review on a quarterly basis of whether the agency is moving forward with the targets and the thresholds that have been established for example, for customer satisfaction, for team engagement, and whether those processes are really working the way that we expect them to. Customer satisfaction, that's one that I have been talking with you about for a few years now, and that is, I think the organization has had a very solid reputation for service for at least well over a decade. But we also knew that there was more to customer satisfaction than simply being responsive. And so the customer satisfaction work, I think what we did is prove that to be true, and I'll talk a little bit about more of that in the future slides. And then team engagement, what we wanted to do when we started the culture work 3 years ago was have an organization that was much more customer satisfaction driven with high team engagement of meeting those customer needs and customer expectations. And we are 2 years into team engagement, and the data and the information is being used in a way to manage the organization. And there's not a slide in the future, so I'll talk a little bit about the team engagement process. So we interviewed about 50 of our 250 employees, and we asked them what needs and expectations would you have in order to be fully satisfied as a team member at DRS. And we took all of those stories, and we turned them into team engagement criteria, and there are 7 in total. We evaluate that on a quarterly basis now with a 1 to 10 scale, and when we started, our baseline was 28.6 on team engagement or team satisfaction. As of this last quarter, we have now hit our goal, and that is 80% of the organization scoring at an 8 or higher on all of those criteria at an individual level. So we feel good about that. We've become more of a listening organization internally, and think we've also become a more listening organization with our customers.
Marcy, can you follow that up again one more time? You did the survey, or the team engagement survey of 50 out of the 250 people.
50 out of 250, and those were individual one-on-one interviews.
And the score initially was 28.6.
28.6 on a 1 to 10. And we were, I would say, frankly, a little surprised by it. I mean, we felt...
I'm surprised by that.
Yeah, we felt some of it within the organization as well, but the statewide employee survey, which I think this agency participates in as well, on the 1 to 5 scale, we were scoring at a 4 or higher on all of those standardized 8 to 10 questions. But when we really went out and asked team members, are you fully satisfied with the work that you're doing at DRS, and what would it take for your needs and expectations to be met? It was more about being customer focused, more customer focused, i.e. not just about service, but it's also around accuracy. It was being people and team focused, having a higher level of accountability, so self-accountability, team accountability, and leader accountability. Pursuing excellence, which means people are proud to tell others that they work at DRS. More learning and growth opportunities. So there are 7 criteria in all. And when we evaluated those on an individual basis, accountability and supportive and engaged leadership were the 2 criteria that were lagging significantly behind the others.
And so then how long before the next survey and it was up?
Yeah, the first quarter, again, I think it was more of a trust that we're listening. The first quarter ticked up dramatically to over 50%. But it was a year before we hit our target.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then the retirement services workflow, and that work came out of the team engagement interviews. One of the stories that we consistently heard across our retirement services division was that it was getting much more difficult to manage the phones, handle the phone calls that were coming in, because customers were needing more of our time, not less of our time, to really understand their benefit. At the same time, they were doing the calculations and what we call the back office work. So very difficult to balance those 2 things in an individual position. And they were not feeling as successful in that structure. So we did initiate a team, and I'll talk more about that as well. We initiated a team to look at the workflow and whether there should be changes made to it, and we just did that in April of this year. Idea implementation, again, that came out of team engagement interviews. People felt that how they defined being recognized as a DRS employee was their ideas were being implemented in the organization, i.e. they're seeing their fingerprints on the organization. And in the past, they had been submitting their ideas to their manager or their team leader and not feeling that those ideas were really being moved forward in any positive way. So we implemented a product called Idea Scale and allowed and set it up that team members could initiate ideas and then put them into some new prioritization processes. And I have some data on that to share with you as well. And then this legislative session, we did get funding, $3 million, to begin replacing our employer reporting application. So I'll talk a little bit more about the goals of what that project will do. And if that sounds good, I'll move on. So this is excuse me.
Marcy, just a question. Did you find it better in the focus groups, those 50 person that you got that? That's very individualized feedback.
It is.
Was that better than the actual? It sounds like you also did a survey of all your staff as well.
So what we did is we interviewed one-on-one the 50 employees or team members, and we had fellow team members who we trained on how to conduct these interviews. We had them do the interview. And based on the stories and the expectations that we received, we developed those 7 criteria. We then validated the 7 criteria with all 250 employees to make sure that it was normalized across the agency.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So I know this is very difficult to read and maybe easier locally, but this really represents the highest level of DRS, and the mission, vision, and values as we were conducting this work did not change that dramatically. Our mission is pretty clear. Our vision is around having satisfied customers and valued team members, and then the guiding values, again, did not change that much, really reflective of the team engagement criteria that I talked about. What we did implement were new key goals, and what we like about this system is that as we're looking at new initiatives or new strategies, what we want to have is those key goals always in balance. So something that we may initiate or invest a lot of resources in may engage our team members, but may not make us a vigilant resource steward. So what we try to do is keep those key goals in balance as we're looking at new capability improvements. The other thing I like about this system is that it assigns a key point or a single point of accountability and responsibility for everything at DRS. So every process, every outcome will have a member of the DRS leadership team as the accountable party. And what that means for that person is if there's a constraint happening, i.e. we're off target, we're off our thresholds we've established, that individual works across the organization to remove that constraint. So in the past, what we would have is we would have Jennifer Dahl, who works in retirement services, and we have Chris Lamb, who works in information services. They would be passing an issue back and forth to one another within their silos. Now Jennifer Dahl, on paying benefits, watches that across the organization. And when she reports out at the QTR, of course, she wants to report out that her peers are working collaboratively with her to make sure that those targets are being met. So this is a reflection of all the core processes in the agency. Every one of those core processes, again, have performance targets. And we have a view every quarter on how well we're doing in meeting those targets. Oh, that was nice, Mark. So this is quarterly target review. We have our next one on the 29th, next Monday. And you will notice that there are items in red. And many of these items we knew either, so when we first set up the system, we had data that was not available, and that is represented by the gray areas. We also knew that we were going to have processes and outcomes that were going to be in red because we were measuring new things. And the data may or may not have existed, so we were creating data. And we also knew that possibly we're not putting as much resources or attention to areas that we should be. The yellow obviously means we're moving toward green, and then the greens, of course, are in healthy status. And in our quarterly target review, where we focus is yellow and red. We'll do a review at the end of the green areas for some recognition, but the quarterly target review is really around problem solving and connecting our lean, our green belts, and our black belts into helping solve why that performance or why that outcome is off its target. So this is a single view of the system, and this is a more specific view of the system. So operational health is an operating process. And what we want there, of course, is less gray, which means that we actually have data to determine whether performance is on track or off track, and there's no red. And then 2 yellows are less than 1% away from being green. And the operational health indicator is really a culmination of all of the operational targets to see overall as a system and as an agency whether we're moving forward in the way that we had planned to move. So target is to have 60% in green. We have more measures operational, which means we have more data, and that we'll have more in our QTR number 4. And QTR number 4, we should experience a little more comfort within that process. It's every leader in the organization attends this meeting. Every leader is expected to engage, and every leader is expected to report back out to their teams on this system. So here's another one around operating process of paying benefits, which Jennifer Dahl is the owner of. And estimates, of course, are a primary product that we produce and one that our customers are very interested in. Our goal is to turn those around within 5 days, and you can see that it's a little volatile right now. But we did change the measure from the number not within 5 days to the percentage within 5 days, trying to keep it at a positive view. But we dropped down into the yellow in this area. So the next quarterly target review, Jennifer will be up talking about what caused this to tick down and what is the action plan to get it back into green. Recalcs, you can see performance there is not great. The goal there is to have all recalcs done within 90 days. We're obviously off target there. We do believe the reorganization that we implemented in RSD will help us with that, as well as some lean teams that are working on better coordination with the employer on getting the data more timely. But that is an area where we are significantly off target. The other piece of the system, which is really more about the strategies or the capability improvements that we want to make. So as we get more efficient on the operational side, we move resources into capability improvements. So i.e. things that our customers are asking for that we currently don't have resources to do, those will come into the breakthrough or the capability initiatives. Get caught up with you. And this was done, many of you are probably familiar with SWOT, which is your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And most of these projects came through that analysis with the leadership team. And you'll notice that they're framed by the key goals that were in that management system. So if they don't fit within the key goals, are likely not to show up on a strategy or a implementation plan. Customer single sign-on and customer satisfaction processes are in place. So some of these actually have been implemented, while others, like the KMS, are in process of being implemented. But this is a way for the entire organization to see what are the strategies, what are the change projects moving forward, and where will I be spending my time in helping to implement these projects in the future. So I mentioned customer satisfaction, and it's been over a year since our benefits team, who is on the phone with customers, they used a very similar process to what we used with the team engagement interviews. They, as customers were calling in to the contact center or to the call center, they asked the question at the end of that call, what would it take for you to be fully satisfied as a DRS customer? And basically there were 3 criteria, so not 7. There were 3 criteria that our customers said were very important to them. And the first one is around respectful, and 2 of them are behavior related and 1 is more product related. But they want a respectful interaction, which is probably not a surprise to any of you. But specifically, be treated as a valued customer, be patient and caring. The other thing that we heard is that, again, people want more of the expert's time. That this belief that we can educate everyone to a basic level around their benefit plan, we're beginning to question that a little bit based on what customers are telling us. They want to have access to us. They want to have access to information in a very simplified way, but they really look to us as being the experts at the time that they need us, and less attention, less time invested in them getting up to speed on their own. And we're hearing that loud and clear in these interviews. More of your time, not less of your time. So find ways to get more efficient on your processing side so you can spend more time with me on the contact side. There we go. Responsive. And again, I think this was an area that the agencies had a fairly solid reputation for a number of years. Quick access to people. We had measurements around 90% of calls answered within 30 seconds and hitting that in a green area for well over a decade. Estimates responded to within 5 business days. Correspondence responded to within 5 business days. Walk-ins with or without an appointment are meeting with a knowledgeable person in less than 4 minutes. So responsive, we had good infrastructure in place there around the processes, and so we remain green here. So one of the things that we'll want to watch for is, can we remain green in the responsive as we're working on the product side as well? And then, like I said, the last one is right. They're making significant decisions based on information that the team members at DRS are providing, and they want to have that information right the first time. And some of our process measures are definitely indicating how correct is that estimate versus the final calculation. That's one of the process measures we have in place. And we have a threshold up or down that we want that to fall within, this happy corridor, if you will. So again, customer satisfaction, there's a little controversy over this, as you can imagine. So rather than just having the leaders or the team members who were working in the retirement services division, we actually have every leader in the organization conducting customer satisfaction interviews. And these are not surveys. These are one-on-one interviews with customers. And we get a list every month of potential candidates who retired in the prior month. And we'll go through that list. Retirees seem to be a little bit busy, so we get 7 or 8 that we can select from, but at least 1 has to be done by every team leader in the organization. And then we use our extended leadership team meetings to talk about that feedback and what we're hearing in terms of themes, recognition, or opportunities. So there were 331 interviews done since March, and the first 3 are more opportunities, I would say. So themes are more follow-up, so more status updates. We have people who submit their retirement application and paperwork fairly early in comparison to their actual retirement date. They'd like to see some follow-up along the way. They're afraid that something has gotten lost. Forms and publications continue to be difficult to understand. We are really moving toward getting more forms and publications online only and getting away from paper. As soon as you produce paper, it's typically outdated within 30 days with the way that this business seems to work. So trying to drive more attention to the website of what we do, but that means that we have to make it very simple and very easy to use. and the recalculation takes too long. So not only can we see that in the data, we're hearing it directly from our customer groups. What they like is that our people are good. They're pleasant and they're knowledgeable, and that they do have a strong appreciation for how quickly we answer the phone and how quickly we greet walk-ins when they come in, again, with or without an appointment. And I can give you more data on this if you're interested. We actually have some charts to show, but we'll be in yellow for customer satisfaction on the 29th. So as I mentioned, the workflow structure, it's likely the largest change that has happened at DRS since the imaging system was brought in 2001 in terms of an organizational change project that dramatically impacts the way people do their work every day. But again, what we heard through the team engagement survey or team engagement interviews was that it's very difficult for people to balance talking on the phone and consulting with people and doing the back office work, especially if that is a complex calculation. We wanted to create more flexibility. We know that the workload really is cyclical at DRS, yet our workflow structure was static. So even though we knew that teachers retired in a certain month, we were not moving resources over to help the teachers unit support the workload peak. So everything was very static in the structure, and it really was not based on where the customer needs were actually happening. It was based on this very static, can't move type of approach. We also wanted to reduce variability, and so as you distinguish some of the processes from one another, you can really focus, I think, much more deeply on how do you make processes much more consistent, which is also a lean value. But throughout all the changes, we definitely want to maintain our high responsiveness and our high levels of accuracy, that we can't sacrifice that as we're continuing to make organizational change. So those were the goals. So the new structure does create the contact center, and they take care of phones, walk-ins, correspondence, emails, and then the processing center takes care of the retirement calculations, recalculations, connecting the estimates. What we had in the past also was a workload assignment that was done based on your SSN. So you had an SSN range as a retirement services analyst. We did not think that that was as customer satisfaction driven as it could have been because, again, some RSAs had a workload that was higher than others. Some work units had workloads that were higher than others. A first in, first out is, in our opinion, the best way to provide that best service to the customer. And then the knowledge management system is a way that we can make sure that the answers that we're giving to customers and how we're consulting with one another in the teams, the knowledge management system will be the source of all of that information. And I will say that we've actually experienced much more turnover within the last year than we've had in the past 5 to 6 years. And it's a 10 to 12-month training program to get a new retirement services analyst up to speed where they can be on the phones comfortably answering your questions. So this knowledge management system will be key to making sure that that consistency continues.
I was going to ask a question
Yeah.
from you. We were directing people at one point, trying to get them to go to the online calculation. Does that just kind of lend to more of this kind of contact, that they'll do their online calculation and that just leads to more phone calls and more?
Interestingly enough, I think in some cases, not so much with your system. Again, your system, very knowledgeable group of members about their plan. In other systems, I would say that we're seeing some uptick in the use of like the online retirement application, not to the levels that your group is using them,
Okay.
but also wanting the confidence of contacting someone and say, I think this is right, but can you verify it for me? At least my interviews that I've been doing recently, people have been using the online retirement application and not interacting with our team at all at retirement, more interacting with them at the estimate level.
Okay.
So I won't spend a lot of time on the lean green belts and black belts, other than we have 19 green belts who we've trained. We have a single black belt at this point, and we have 2 additional black belts going to training in September to be certified. And what you see on the screen is really the values that the green belts and the black belts put together on how they're going to work together as a team, and then how they're going to work with the organization, because their role is to teach others. Their role is not to do. Their role is to teach everyone the problem-solving methodology that we've adopted at DRS, which again creates that common language around performance, a common language around problem-solving. And so we have a number of people, high influence people, who are working on several projects right now. And I mentioned idea scale. When we first started making what I call the culture changes, we knew that there was this pent-up demand or pent-up need to have ideas be reviewed and implemented into the systems. And again, people felt that their managers and their supervisors at that time were not moving them forward appropriately. And so we went ahead and implemented idea scale immediately. And you'll see that, and these are not anonymous ideas. We had the conversation about whether anonymity would be important to the system. But one of the team engagement criteria is open and transparent communication. And so that was really easy to talk with the team, that if it's open and transparent communication for leadership, it's open and transparent communication for the entire organization. So when people are putting their ideas forward, their name is attached to them. And it's very much a social media type of space, because you'll have a retirement services analyst put an idea out, and then it gets debated pretty significantly by the other retirement services analysts before it's picked up by either a green belt or a black belt to go into the prioritization. But we have 80 ideas completed, 32 ideas that are in progress, and 41 ideas that are in review, i.e. they're going to take some resources, so we need to get them through the prioritization process. What was interesting is we launched it, and within 30 days there were over 70 ideas. And we tried to move forward pretty quickly, again, to show trust in the system, move forward quickly to implement 30 of those ideas. Some of them really simple things that likely the team member could have been doing within their job. So what we want to do is teach people how to solve problems and have them solve them closest to the service, rather than having to escalate everything through the structure.
Actually pretty good.
So Lean is happening not only in the retirement services program, it's also happening in our information services program through a methodology called Agile. And how I would describe the difference between what we used to do and what we're currently doing is we would have these major IT projects that would last 1 year to 2 years. And at the end, we would deliver an amazing product, right? It was very well thought through, great project management. Agile is more about what can you implement in the term of sprints, but what can you implement in shorter duration? So if that 12 to 2 year project could have been divided into 3 to 6 month projects, what would that have looked like? So it's changing the paradigm a little bit in our information services program of, how can we move more quickly? How can we act more with a sense of urgency on some of these things that we're hearing either from our team members or from our customers? And 2 of those that are up here as examples were from the team engagement interviews or from Idea Scale. So here's the data on the online retirement application, and you can see all systems and plans. About 24% of the applications are coming in through this channel versus left 2. Over 40% of the applications are coming through this channel. And I think that matches up nicely with what we see in terms of the number of online account users from your plan versus other plans. People are much more comfortable, it seems, in your plan to use online. So 9,700 registered users for online account access, and less so for all of your members, unless they're also members of the 457 plan, but implementing single sign-on, which I know I talked about several times here, wanting to get that moved forward. That is implemented, and really where I think that is most helpful is if you're a Plan 3 member, and we have 2 record keepers. So you go out to your Plan 3 website, you go to your 457 website, and then you have your DB account that's managed by DRS. In the past, they had to authenticate into each one of those systems. Now there's a single authentication point if you come through DRS. So for your membership, it would be if you're member of Left Plan 2 and a participant in the 457 plan, you could log in once rather than twice. So questions that are coming into the contact center, and I got Alex Koseski and Kamano Creed here in the audience. If you have any other questions about the types of contacts or the kinds of information that are being requested, where can I get my health insurance and who do I contact? COLAs, of course, are of interest, and retire, rehire. So education and outreach, I know this is one of the areas that you asked us to pay attention to. The education and outreach program now has LEOFF Plan 2 as a normal part of what they offer. But I would say where more of the activity is happening is through ad hoc requests coming from fire districts. Apparently right now it's primarily fire districts, but any LEOFF 2 employer can contact the seminars team. They're happy to come out and do a custom seminar. We're up in Kitsap County here next month. Pat McGillicuddy reached out, and we did some sessions in Tacoma, but much more ad hoc related. The other thing that the program manager indicated to me today is that if they're going to be in a particular area and the contact center has been receiving some calls either from that employer or from members from that area, they'll reach out to the employer to see if they can come in and do a seminar. So many more opportunities for the team at DRS to get out and talk about LEOFF Plan 2. So the employer reporting application, basically there's two pieces to this project. The first is really building out the infrastructure. So we have a mainframe system that was developed back in the 90s. It's aging fairly quickly, but it is stable. But we also know that we have to continue to look to the future. So we did request funding to begin replacing out the first piece of that application, which was also the first piece that was created in the 90s, to replace the way that employers report data and money. So the RFP, we're planning right now in August to issue that, to get the software in and get that installed and working, with an anticipated rollout date in June of 2014. And again, right now, the feedback we get from employers is that it's very difficult to use the current system. And the payroll community, they experience quite a bit of turnover in those payroll positions. And so having to consistently or constantly train someone new in a fairly complex reporting structure, what we committed to the employers is that we would find a way to minimize that impact, that we would take on the complexity within the system versus putting the complexity out with them. And again, we're going to be using agile type of development processes to put the new infrastructure in place. And so this is an area I think that I know I've spoken to your executive director about in the past, but we have an occupational nurse consultant who advises the plan administrator on disability and catastrophic determinations. And we've recently had some turnover in that role, and we're looking at potentially procuring an outside source to come in and help us make those determinations. The determination would still be made by the department, by the plan administrator. But this would be someone who can look at these cases and advise us appropriately. And so, not in this meeting, likely, but would love to get your feedback on whether you think this is something the department should pursue. And this is not the company necessarily that we will go with. This is a company who came in and spoke with us about a month ago. Retirement readiness, again, I think one of the things we were surprised about is that people really don't want to take the time to learn about their benefit or their plan generally. Again, I think your group is an exception to that. So how do we make sure that we structure our processes and the way that our people are interacting to make sure that people are ready for retirement when it's time? So they're not, at the time of retirement saying, I wish I would have known how much health care was going to cost, or I wish I would have known that I had access to the TAP annuity if you're Plan 3. So we want to put some structure around what does retirement readiness mean. At this point, this project has been put a little bit on hiatus until we really understand the scope and the framework that we want to move it forward in. But it is something that we think needs quite a bit of attention. So what's next? We definitely want to hold the gain in RSD. Again, this is the most major change that has happened in that program in well over 10 years. And with any change of this size, it's going to take, I would say, at least a year to get it stabilized, get the contact center, get them the tools they need, get the leaders supporting them in the ways that they need to be supported. In ISD as well, we want to hold well, we're not holding the gain yet, but they have a significant paradigm shift happening in the technology environment that they will work within. So we've been a mainframe shop for a very long time. We're going to be moving out of that, and that will be moving out over the next 6 to 8 years, so fairly quickly in IT terms. So the employer reporting application, extremely important to the employers, as well as important to other stakeholders who would like to have more information out of the system. And then visual management systems, what those are, and we've started installing those around the agency. It's a way for our team members to see what is happening within these processes. So what's happening to make them yellow, red, or green? Where do they need to be paying attention? Where should their work be dedicated to that day? What we want is people to be self-accountable, and they can't be self-accountable if they don't have the data to know where they should be working. So which processes are calculations aging where they need to work in calculations? Is correspondence aging where they need to work in correspondence? Right now, we have the team leaders telling them where they need to work. What we want to do is really build out that self-management and that self-accountability so that they can do it on their own, and the team leaders then are focused on coaching and developing their teams. So that is a very quick update on what's happening. But again, like I said, we did all of the culture work for the first year and then started building the infrastructure to support that culture. But we knew that the new infrastructure would not work if we didn't start working a bit more on what it would take for teams to feel more engaged and our customers to feel more like their full needs were being met.
Question? Marcy, what's the employer reporting application? What is that?
So that will be the way that currently the 1,300 public employers that report data and money to us, and they do that through a fairly convoluted process right now, and this is a new system that will make it much easier for them to report. It will also likely require them to report different types of data to us as well. So we've been engaging with them over the last 2 years to understand what their needs and expectations are around this employer reporting, and our request to get funding and our justification was really based on their needs, more so than ours. So that's where we're starting. And the RFP will go out in August to procure a vendor to help us put that in place.
So you're going to start that in August with them?
We'll start building the infrastructure in August, and it will be rolled out in 2014. So it's a very quick turnaround schedule.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you,
All
Marcy.
right, thanks.
Before Marcy leaves, I just want to say, I'm sorry,
Sure.
just great work. Good work. Always great to have your annual reports. Always great to hear what your staff is doing. So just good work. Thank you.
very much.
Ready for Mark? Okay, as we've had in the past, annual reports on benchmarking from DRS, and Mark's with us again, so we'll move on to our benchmarking results. Okay, welcome, Mark.
Oh, good morning, Kelly, other members of the board. I'm pleased to have with me here today Jan Hartford, one of the partners at CEM Benchmarking, to help out on this. I've known Jan for well over 10 years now in our relationship with CEM, and to have her help me co-present this information is quite a pleasure. I mean, we had her help me yesterday to keep the select committee entertained while I do this information. So it's always nice because my pension administration jokes get a little tough to find over the years. So with that, if there's no starting questions, we'll have Jan go ahead and start out.
I hope you'll share some of those jokes with me so I can use them in my presentations. It's a very great pleasure to be here. Just a little bit of background on CEM Benchmarking. We were founded in 1991. We began by benchmarking pension fund investment administration, and we moved to benchmarking the operational side of your business or pension administration in 1999. And Washington DRS has been a participant more or less from the beginning. There are 4 different components to the Pension Administration Service. There is a comprehensive survey, which is quite lengthy because the data that we get from it produces this report. And Mark is the person that completes the survey for Washington DRS. We also do annual targeted best practice research. Interestingly enough, this year it was paperless pension administration. There's also access to a peer network and an annual peer conference. We do have a global participation in fiscal year 2012, and the results that you will see today are from fiscal year 2012. We had 28 participants from the United States, 13 from Canada, 10 from the Netherlands, 1 from Denmark, 1 from Sweden as well, 1 from the United Arab Emirates, and 8 from the United Kingdom. The UK systems are not included in your report because they're all public sector systems, but they're all administered by third parties. We also have a fairly large contingency from Australia, but they're all defined contribution plans. So the public sector funds in Australia have moved into a DC environment. And the really interesting part about the global diversity is that we work very hard at finding forums for all of these participants to share ideas and best practices. And certainly Washington has been a big part of this sharing.
Now, one of the items that I'll talk about, and Jan will talk about as well, is the fact that there is a peer group within this data, although there are those over 60 participants, and all of their data does come to bear in the report, and we get those comparisons. We're also uniquely compared to a peer group, which is the larger U.S. systems who participate. In looking at that, one of the good things about the number of participants, in that there is 16 of them that have over 250,000 active members and annuitants, it gives CEM a very statistically significant and meaningful database to work with. So when they do all their analytics, there is some meaning behind that data. The other aspect of this is in getting the smaller systems and the international systems, it's a wealth of information that comes to the table. One of the things that I've done and that CEM does as well is to look for, who are the other individuals out there who aren't participating, to kind of keep those feelers out there to bring them in. I have kind of a selfish interest in getting them in, especially the larger U.S. systems who don't participate. To me, it gives me a bigger database to work from. It also gives me access to more kind of brain power, more ideas around the nation. How are people approaching issues? How are they dealing with them? How are they cost-effectively approaching them? Some of the larger ones who aren't in the database that you might ring a bell. CalPERS did not participate last year, but they're probably going to be in this next year. Florida, one of the larger systems we've been working on over the years to try to get in. And then New Jersey and North Carolina who come in and out of participation. And then there's about 8 other systems, primarily around the East Coast and the Southeast United States, who haven't participated over the years, who would be big enough to come into our peer group, and they as well would be potential sources of new ideas. But it is good to see this size of a database in effect for us to get our analysis based upon.
This graph shows your total administration costs. This is total costs per active member and annuitant. And for DRS, you came in at $60. Now, you're represented by the darkest bar. Your peer group is represented by the next darkest bars. And then we've put in this slide all of the North American systems so that you can see where you stand in terms of cost in North America. And you will note that you're in the lowest cost quadrant. And then above the bar graph is a trend analysis. Your DRS is represented by the very darkest line, trend line. And again, you can see that you have been consistently lower cost over the last 4 years. Now, we do, in the report, explain why your costs fall where they do. We look at 6 different factors. They're actually written out across the bottom of this graph. So we look at economies of scale, how many transactions you're doing per member, how many transactions your DRS is doing per full-time equivalent staff, the costs per full-time equivalent staff, so salaries and building utilities costs, IT costs for FTEs. We also look at other costs such as third-party administered costs, and finally back office costs, which include major projects. So DRS was 28% lower cost than the pure average. And the 3 primary reasons why is that you're lower cost per FTE, you have high productivity as measured by the number of transactions on average done by full-time equivalent staff, and you also had lower major project costs.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So just a quick question on that first one, that lower cost per FTE. I'm assuming as you do a national average, let's say versus California, your average cost per FTE here maybe, just throw a number out, 80,000, and go to California, it's 100,000. Is that lower cost per FTE that you're talking about? What's the average salary? Is that what you're focused on right there?
We're looking at average salary and building and utility costs, HR costs. You're right, cost environment does play a role. It's not part of how we mathematically equate it, but we do look at it, and we do include that in our executive summary, because obviously it's more expensive to administer a retirement fund in Manhattan than it is in Jefferson City, Missouri. So
Right.
yes, it does play a role.
And interestingly, Olympia, Washington environmentally does come out being slightly above the pure median for costs.
But this shows us below, so I'm trying to figure out how do you reconcile those?
This is below because it's a composite of multiple measures. So it is the salaries and benefits as well as the facilities costs and some of the other support costs.
Technically Tumwater Mark, I think, right?
Well, yeah, we'll have to have them pull a different city in. One of the things over the years in participating with CEM is, kind of my admiration of their persistence in trying to explain why the administrators have different costs and to basically try to find the silver bullet, what magically helps all of us administrators know the things we should avoid or the things we should do to try to get our costs low. And in addition to the 6 items that they looked at in the most recent report, one of their analysts, a very talented analyst who probably even loves data more than I do, he was looking at all of the data provided by the different participants to try to find, what statistical relationship might be out there that really points to what is driving costs. And the one that he came upon that actually had a strong enough relationship to bring forward to the conference was the aspect of having a higher back office FTE per member. And that's where these aren't your direct customer service FTEs, these are your support FTEs, your IT areas, your people working on major projects, support positions, and then governance and finance as well. And in those, it was interesting in that DRS is low cost, and we're approximately 16% less back office FTEs than our peer average. So this is one of the indicators that he was able to identify that had a statistically significant relationship, and our data fit right in with the analysis that he produced. Now, one of the other items that CEM has historically looked at is the aspect of service, and this is one that the participants definitely look forward to, and in fact have approached CEM on having them maintain this and even expand it in various areas, because we're very interested in learning how do we differ by service. It's not just cost, but what about the services that we do provide to our members? And in the case of service, it's defined from a member's perspective. Higher service means faster turnaround times, more availability, more choice, and higher quality. So this has numerous indicators throughout the survey. So this is a composite score, and in the case of DRS, we've consistently scored right around the peer median for our service levels. And when you drill down into this and look at the different activity level measures, we score higher than the peer median in 10 of the 15 different activities. And many of those get at something Marcy talked about, and it's the aspect of responsiveness, something that for over a decade we have emphasized. In some of the other areas where we are slightly below the peer median, those tend to be various or higher cost or high touch areas, getting at direct mailings, which could include actual mailings to even inactive member homes, performing counseling in the field, one-on-one counseling, and this is different than the seminars. To count as one-on-one counseling in the field, you have to be able to provide the same level of service as you do at your headquarters. And then the aspect of comprehensive statements, where to get essentially a perfect service score in the annual statements, there is much more information that would have to be in the statements that we provide, including estimates of future pension benefits, a complete comprehensive accounting of all of your service credits and all of your salary history. Some of the statements that are available out there and produced can be quite thick in comparison to what we provide, but they also can be extremely expensive.
Now, most systems, or many systems, assume that there is a correlation between cost and service. That is, high service tends to be high cost. But if you look at this graph and you look at the upper left-hand quadrant, you'll notice that probably a third of the U.S. systems fall in the high service, low cost quadrant. What we've seen is that service is not actually a good predictor of cost. And that's because costs are driven more by the volumes of transactions, the service transactions, than by their timeliness, availability, or quality. So what we mean by this is that a number of systems may offer one-on-one counseling or presentations as DRS has their outreach program. A number don't have outreach programs. They may say we offer that, but they actually don't do very much of it. So it's not driven by the actual availability of the service, but more by how many of those service transactions you're doing. And also, service is partly a function of historic investment in IT, which doesn't always appear in current costs.
One of the other measures that CEM has looked at over the years is complexity. And this is one where our peers have actually been catching up to us, and some have been passing us. And this is basically the only measure where I'm very comfortable with them doing that. And even though we're higher than the peer average in 12 of the 15 causes, it really is primarily the first bullet there that gets at why, at least in the past, we've had peers that have been above us in the complexity score, and it gets at the employer's ability to change the benefit structure, essentially to deviate from the common structure. So what you have is the administrator essentially isn't administering one PERS plan or two PERS plans. They're implementing and administering multiple PERS plans based upon the employer you work for. And that's historically what had CalPERS and one of the New York systems having a higher score than DRS. Well, what has happened over the past 5 or 6 years is, as other states and jurisdictions have had to wrestle with the aspect of having sustainable pensions, and they've looked at changing their benefit structures. Well, as you give that new benefit structure and that new set of rules to an administrator to basically you have to administer a new set of plan and rules, that brings up their complexity score. And that includes bringing in some of the DC and the hybrid plans into the other states. As those come in, their scores start to inch up and in some cases even pass us. It is something that CEM has looked at over the years to try to see, is this in effect the magic bullet, the big predictor of cost? And it isn't. Statistically, what they've identified is that in the extremes it can have an impact upon cost, but it is not a direct linear relationship to cost. One of the areas where complexity does have an impact on cost, however, is in information technology. And although DRS has a very high complexity score, it is not reflected as driving our IT costs at this time. And that is in large part due to the fact that of where we're at in our IT investment cycle. Our current project that we'll be pursuing in the upcoming fiscal year is not reflected here because we didn't start spending on it last fiscal year. The good news, however, is that in this slide it shows that in the previous fiscal year, our costs were actually below the peer median, but the capability of our IT systems to provide services to members, to provide services to employers, and to provide services within our own teams for our employees to use the systems to provide service, they get a higher capability score. So this is, good low cost, high capability. This is where we want to be. Even when we plug in the investment for the employer reporting project, had we plugged that in to this data, had it been in place, we still wouldn't be up to the peer median in cost. So it's a fairly low dollar investment relative to our peers.
This slide shows a predicted cost that CEM calculated for DRS. The predicted cost equation is based on economies of scale, transaction volumes, plan design complexity, and cost environment. And you can see DRS, your actual cost was $60, but based on these factors, we would predict you to have a cost of $88 per active member and retiree. So you're operating at a much lower cost level than we would predict based on these factors.
Now, this is a new slide that I put in from prior year's presentations to get at the aspect of, why does DRS participate in this service? And contrary to some people's opinions, it's not so that I get a 300-page analytical report for myself to read. That's really not why we do it, even though I do really enjoy reading it and going through it and finding the data anomalies to help feed into other processes. But it really is the others that we work with through the service, and there is kind of this bond, this common desire to be better. The participants that are at the conferences, that are out there in the peer network, they're looking for that information, the suggestions. Who's dealt with this in the past? How have you dealt with it? Are you wrestling with it now? What type of approach are you taking? What is your uptake on some of your paperless automation techniques that you're implementing? How much did that cost you? All of that information, and they all willingly share this. It's not like we're competing. We're trying to help each other to administer public pension benefits around the U.S. and even internationally to get the ideas from, how are the Dutch approaching, working with their younger members? How are the Australians working on coming up with some of their DC plans? What are their secrets to becoming cost effective? In also looking at the 2013 conference, which was back in Columbus this year, the presentations and the agenda is really developed based upon what is out there in the environment as far as a pension administration. What are our challenges? Who does CEM see, or who does any of us see as really being on the leading edge of something or doing something tremendously well? That drives the agenda, and then we get those leaders to come and talk with us about, what are they doing. In the case of the first item here, disaster recovery lessons learned from both New York and Louisiana to get their experiences from the hurricanes, the floods, and not just to listen to the very interesting stories, but also to listen for what did they discover they didn't anticipate, and how can we feed that into our own disaster planning. Talking about the strategies to increase communication effectiveness to younger members, getting at that aspect of retirement readiness, even though we have a population out there who may, you almost have to drag them to the subject. They're really not interested. Well, has anyone found a way to get them interested, to really want to get that information, so that when they do retire, you don't have those statements of regret? I wish I would have thought of something else. I wish I would have done something else earlier. The trends in becoming paperless. why are other administrators becoming paperless? What are their effective strategies of becoming paperless? What are they automating that their members really love to do over the web? Controlled organizational change. This was a very interesting presentation by one of the Dutch systems. Massive change in their organization and how they were approaching that, and approaching it both organizationally, managerially, but also culturally. And then the final item, the presentation where Marcy talked, as well as the head of Oregon PERS, or their deputy, talked about implementing the new performance measurement system and integrating that into the agencies. So a lot of peers and a lot of information back and forth, give and take to us, for us to become better. And that essentially is part of my summary, where the comprehensive benchmarking, it does show that DRS is low cost. We provide a solid level of service. We have a relatively high complexity score. We are very cost effective in our systems. We're lower than our benchmark cost, and then we use this data as well as the participation itself to feed that into lean improvements and our own continuous improvement efforts outside of lean. Any questions?
Questions? All right, Mark, well, thank you. Jan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
One quick comment. Again, this benchmarking has been going on longer than the board has existed. I remember participating in it back when I was at DRS, and your commitment, your agency's commitment to continual improvement, this is one of the areas where that commitment shows through year after year after year. It's great that there's an organization out there at like CEM to do this, but I remember you were doing benchmarking even before we knew CEM existed, because you knew that was a way to continue to improve. So I just wanted to share those kudos with you.
Okay, we're going to recess for lunch, and we'll take up the meeting in about 20 minutes, so we'll reconvene at noon. Okay, we're in recess. And I want to jump forward real quickly to the October meeting update. My understanding that almost everybody here, if not all 6 of us, were contacted about the October meeting update. And so I think we have sufficient numbers to move the meeting. We just need a formal motion to do so. The original scheduled meeting was the 23rd of October, and we want to move it to October 16th.
So
Steve,
moved.
anything to add?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Anything to add on that?
No.
Okay. All right. All those in favor, we're going to use our vote here, and mine is up, by the way. Yep. So go ahead and
Take me where I need to go.
Chairman's going to open up the roll call machine. Okay, 6-4. The motion carries, and the meeting will be updated to October 16th. Excuse me.
Do your update, or you want to do OSA?
I can do the admin update.
Okay. All right, we'll move now back to the administrative update. Agenda item number 5.
Three brief items. The Select Committee on Pension Policy met yesterday, and there was an idea that in order to improve coordination between the two bodies, they asked me to present a couple of times a year and answer questions regarding activities that the LEOFF 2 board is working on. So I presented yesterday and gave them sort of the results of your preliminary interim planning from last meeting. Specifically, I talked about the 6 items that you were interested in getting additional information on. The Select Committee did not, that they will not be meeting in August, and they did not add any of those items to their agenda for September. I'll be, I think, talking to them again in October. But in the meantime, there is nothing formal as far as any kind of coordination or any kind of interest from the Select Committee regarding any of the items that the board is working on this interim. I'd be happy to answer any questions about that. I will say the new chair of the Select Committee is Representative Ormsby. This is it's the first time that he's been elected in this role. So that'll be a little bit different at this point in time, though. All the items that they were pursuing were sort of carryovers from last year, with the exception of one new item related to teachers, Plan 3 members' ability to change their contribution rates on an annual basis. They did, particularly in the Executive Committee, there were quite a few questions about this idea of whether or not the IRS change regarding the 401A individual savings accounts, they were interested in getting more information or knowing more about that issue. Not that they were necessarily interested in pursuing it, but it was something that they didn't know a lot about, and so there was some curiosity there. The second, outreach activities. Since the June meeting, the Washington State Council of Firefighters had their annual conference, and I was present for several of the days at that during that conference to answer questions that members had regarding some of the initiatives that the State Council was considering adopting, resolutions that they were considering adopting, and then to give them background information. They were trying to figure out where some of these things were in the pipeline. Several of the items that are on your interim agenda, for instance, the hospital district EMTs, that was also something that they were interested in. Final average salary protection for the local government employees. Ombudsman update. Since we last met, the budget was finalized and the board's budget package for the ombudsman was approved. So we'll be moving forward on filling that position, but not aggressively. One of the things I learned as I was out talking to some of the stakeholder groups, and this came up, the question about the ombudsman is, there seems to be a wide variance of opinions or ideas about what the role of the ombudsman should be. So for instance, as I've talked with the board about it in the past and the budget package as it was submitted, the idea would be that this person would be an expert in the benefits, in the area of benefits related to duty-related deaths and disabilities, that they'd be there to assist the members and their families with questions not just about LEF 2, but about L&I benefits or Department of Justice benefits, Social Security benefits that they may be entitled to, how all of those programs interrelate. But it was very much benefits focused. There are the term ombudsman apparently has some meaning out with some of the other organizations, and so for instance, there was some thought that by some of the stakeholders that maybe the ombudsman should assist in some capacity in the memorial services when there's a line of duty death, or that they should be, one idea was that they should go out to hospitals when there's been an injured member and be there at the hospital to provide some kind of counseling. And so there's one of the things I want to make sure is that that the board is clear on what the roles, what the scope of duties, if you will, of the ombudsman are. And so we'll have I'm going to bring that back to you and make sure that we're all on the same page as far as what that position will be doing, and then move forward as quickly as possible with that kind of shared vision of what the scope of duties related to the ombudsman are. But that was good news that it was protected. In the meantime, we're doing those duties anyway. We're doing it around the office as people are calling in, not nearly as well as would be, as the idea will be when it's implemented. But anybody, if there are questions about that now by any member, they can contact us, and we will do our best to assist them and their families through all of that. The other item I wanted to mention is the next newsletter has been largely finalized. I think it's scheduled to be delivered to members October 1. Should be reaching them, so you won't be seeing it, or your members won't be seeing it in the before the next meeting, but it's August 1. So it'll be there shortly then. They will be seeing it before the next meeting. Then that's it for the administrative update at this time. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions? Okay. And I'll turn it over to Steve to introduce the next topic.
Every 2 years, the board is asked to consider that you receive recommendations on long-term economic assumptions from the Office of the State Actuary. Today we have Lisa Wan from the Office of the State Actuary, and she will be giving you the background related to this board responsibility. It's not an action item for today. You will be getting a presentation of further information on this later in the interim. With that, I will turn it over to Lisa.
Thank you, Steve.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Lisa Wan with the State Actuary's Office. And as Steve mentioned, today is just an overview of the economic experience study. And the purpose of this overview is to help prepare you for hearing recommendations from our office in September on the economic assumptions. So to do this overview, I'm going to try and answer the following questions. What is an economic experience study? Why do we do it? How do we do it? And what's the outcome? And as Steve mentioned, this is an informational briefing. No action is required by the board today. And just to help frame it, high-level answers to those questions are, this is a review of the economic assumptions under the retirement plans. We are trying to determine whether those assumptions remain reasonable or need to change. And to do that, we analyze past experience, future expectations, and we also look at any conditions that led to certain experience in those years. And the outcome are possible assumption changes, which also have potential fiscal impacts with them. So OSA performs mainly two different types of experience studies. So I just wanted to give you that background before we dive into the economic one, because you will start to hear about the other one because we've already started that as well. The economic experience study is performed, as Steve said, every 2 years. And those assumptions are mostly national and regional economic-based assumptions. There are some plan-specific data that's studied in those assumptions, but generally, they're economic-based assumptions. Then the demographic experience study is what's performed at least every 6 years, and that is a massive project that usually takes us a year to complete. And it covers all the other assumptions under the plan that are really plan-specific and, of course, demographic. And those include things like termination, mortality, retirement, disability, what rates of disability, for example, we're seeing in the plans, all the way down to things like the percent of members that are male and female. So there's a whole host of assumptions that are studied in that experience study, and that's why it's done not as frequently, and it takes quite a long time to get through it. So we've already started that study. It's for the period 2007 through 2012. The results of that experience, the demographic experience study, will be presented to you next summer. And those assumption changes get incorporated into the 2013 actuarial valuation, and that valuation will impact 15-17 contribution rates. So back to the economic assumptions. So what is this economic experience study? This is where we study the assumptions that are impacted mainly by the economy and include inflation, general salary increases, the investment return, and growth in system membership. And I'll talk about each one of those in the next slides. And those economic assumptions help us estimate the future benefits that are payable by the plan, because we have to estimate, for example, how much salaries will grow so we know what that final average salary is to determine the benefits. We also use those assumptions to then calculate what's today's value of those benefits and the resulting funding requirements. What are the contribution rates that we need to secure those benefits that are going to be paid in the future? So going into each one of these assumptions, first on the list, the rate of inflation. And this is, we start with broad, national economic inflation, and then we make two sets of adjustments to that inflation number. The first for national price inflation and the second for regional price inflation. And the reason we do this is because the cost of living adjustments that are part of LEOFF Plan 2 benefit structure are based on regional CPI. So we start with a national economic inflation and make the adjustments to get us to an assumption that will model the cost of living adjustments in your plan. And that assumption is then put into the valuation model so we can estimate the cost of those COLAs. Inflation is also used as a component of future salary increases, and we'll talk about that next. So the general salary increase assumption represents the rate of change in an individual salary from year to year. And as I mentioned, future salary levels impact the benefit that's payable at retirement. It also impacts the contributions to the plan because the contributions for LEOFF 2 are a % of salary. The general salary increase assumption has two components. The first, inflation, as I mentioned earlier, inflation is one component of the general salary increase assumption, and the other component is productivity growth. And it's important to note that the general salary increase assumption does not include promotions or merit increases, like the step increases that we're familiar with. That component is considered a demographic assumption. It's really plan-based. That doesn't get impacted by what's happening in the economy. So that gets studied separately in the demographic experience study. But they're considered together, but they're two separate components. And one other way to think about it is the general salary increase really applies to every member every year, but merit and promotions are more specific to typically service levels. So the rate of investment return, one of the third assumptions we study, as we know, it's the anticipated return on both current and future assets of the plan. It's used mainly to determine today's value of those future benefits so we can determine what the contribution rate should be today. It is a key assumption. It has a large impact on the value of those liabilities and the funding requirements for the plan. And it also includes two components, a base being inflation, and we're going to talk about that building method. And then the second component of it is the real rate of return. And finally, the last assumption that we study in this experience study is the growth in system membership. We haven't talked about this a lot with the board, and we want to make sure that you understood this piece and what it's used for. It represents the rate of change in the number of active members covered under the plan. So how many, we're going to have people leave the system, and we're going to have new people come into the system each year. What is that rate of change? And that's our system membership growth. It is used for the plans one in calculating that unfunded actuarial accrued liability rate. So for PERS and TERS 1, everyone's familiar with the fact that they have an unfunded accrued liability, and there are specific UAL payments that are required every year for those plans. This assumption is used to determine those. There isn't an unfunded liability right now in LEOFF Plan 1, so it's not something you see as part of your contribution rate calculation. There are no unfunded liability contributions required for LEOFF Plan 1, so LEOFF 2 does not see that, and this assumption is not used for your plan in that way. The way it is used for your plan is when we do actuarial projections. So when we're doing projections into the future, we have to assume system growth, and we use it for that. But it's not used in our valuations because those are closed group. It's who are the members today. That's what's used in the valuation. That's what's used for the contribution rates for LEOFF 2. So how do these assumptions interact? When we study the economic assumptions, we develop them using what's called a building block method. This is one of the recommended approaches under actuarial standards of practice. So as actuaries, we have to follow a code of conduct, which requires us to follow standards of practice. And this is one of the methods that's in our guidelines for developing economic assumptions. And the building block method ensures the set of assumptions remain consistent. And how it does that is inflation is the base So we develop our inflation assumption, and then it becomes the base for salary growth and investment returns. So that helps keep them consistent. If inflation is changing, that assumption is changing, then our salary growth and investment return typically will change too. So this next chart just shows you what we mean by that building block. As I mentioned, total inflation is developed by broad economic inflation and then adjustments for national and regional price inflation. That gets us to the total inflation assumption. And these are just examples, so this isn't necessarily the recommendation we're going to come to you with in 2 months. And then when we look at the investment return, we again start with the total inflation as one component, and then the real rate of return is the other component of it to get to our nominal or our total investment return assumption. And for salary growth, inflation plus productivity. So the second question, why do we perform an economic experience study? Few reasons. One, it's required in statute for this to be done every 2 years for reporting to the Pension Funding Council. Now, the Pension Funding Council doesn't make decisions for LEOFF 2, but typically the LEOFF 2 board has followed the PFC timeline. So there aren't specific statutes for LEOFF 2 to study this every 2 years, but there are for the Pension Funding Council, and LEOFF 2 typically follows their same schedule. It's also a requirement for actuaries to set assumptions. It's required under our code of conduct, and it's also required for us to follow the standards of practice in setting assumptions whenever we're calculating pension liabilities. We also perform this because things change. Sometimes we have policy or benefit structure changes that then would impact some of these assumptions. And of course, economic conditions and future expectations for the economy can change, as we well know. And at the end of the day, setting reasonable assumptions contribute to reasonable funding. So if our assumptions are reasonable, then we're going to have reasonable levels of funding for the plan. And when we have reasonable funding levels, that also helps manage risks for the plan. Pensions are promises to pay lifetime benefits. If we haven't accumulated enough assets, then you run the risk of having to have additional funding requirements in the future beyond what normally you would expect to have. And you also have the risk of intergenerational inequity, which is not one of the funding goals for the state of Washington. So again, talking a little bit more about managing that risk with these assumptions, we're projecting future outcomes, and projecting anything in the future always involves uncertainty and risk. And one thing we know about setting assumptions is they are going to be wrong. The question is, how wrong are they, and what side of wrong are they? When they are wrong, you can have underfunding of your plan, and so we want to be on the right side of that risk. And to be on the right side of risk means adding a bit of reasonable conservatism in your assumptions. We also know that the risk isn't symmetrical. If you think about the investment return, it's not like a normal distribution or a bell curve, so you don't have symmetrical risk in that assumption. So sometimes you'll see that our best estimate doesn't fall right in the center. One, we're trying to manage that asymmetrical risk, and two, we're trying to be on the right side of the risk or have a little bit of reasonable conservatism. And it's also important to balance risk with other stakeholder needs. You can be very conservative and have high levels of funding, but that's going to impact state local budgets. It's going to impact member take-home pay. You could be on the other side and have low levels of funding, and then you can start to impact benefit plan security. So you have to try and balance those items as well. So then we get into the third question, which is how do we perform an economic experience study? Well, we analyze a lot of data, historical data, experience of the plans. For the economic experience study, most of it is national or regional, and I have a chart on the next slide that shows you each assumption and where we're getting the data. It's mostly national and regional experience. We also review projections for future expectations of these assumptions, and we include other agencies as well. So we work with OFM and the Revenue Forecast Council to get their ideas and information on future expectations for inflation, for example, and also population growth. And then we also look at conditions that may have created certain experience. So, for example, the temporary salary reduction. That was one unique circumstance in this historical period. And we look at that to determine, is that what we'd consider an outlier? So is that highly unlikely to occur again? And if we believe it is, then we may remove or limit the reliance on that data point. Is it within the range of expected outcomes? Would we expect to see this again during this kind of period that we're studying? And if it is, then we'd keep the data point, but probably comment so you're aware that we saw this and we do expect it to continue, and maybe even the likelihood that it would continue. And then we also consider whether it occurred because of a policy or a plan change. And if that's the case, then it could require adjustments. So, for example, several years back, we had a change in the fiscal year for the retirement plans from a September 30 to June 30th fiscal year. So we collected data during that period that was only 9 months long. So we have to look at those things as well and make adjustments for the data. So this next table shows you the 4 economic assumptions we study and the sources where we get information for historical and projected data. And you can see that when we state DRS, that's like plan history. That's actual data for the pension plans. And we use that for salary growth and system growth, but not for investment return or inflation. So it gives you an idea that you can see that most of the data points are coming from the economy versus the plans themselves, which is very different than when we get to the demographic experience study. So then how do we do that with all this data we have? We blend the past and future together to develop our best estimate range and also to develop the single point best estimate assumption within that range. And it's a mix of art and science, so there isn't just an equation that's used to figure out what that best estimate range or best estimate point assumption would be. Again, as I mentioned, we follow guidance in our standards of practice, and it also requires professional judgment. That's kind of where the art comes in. It requires professional judgment on our part as actuaries. We know past isn't always the best predictor in the future, so we have to try and consider what the future is telling us, and how much we will weigh past and future expectations. And that is part of our training and our development as actuaries is to be able to use professional judgment and that mix of art and science. And the final question is, what's the outcome from the economic experience study? So as I mentioned earlier, we not only want to make sure each individual assumption is reasonable, but we also want to make sure the entire set of them are consistent. It's required, again, by our standards of practice. So there's really 2 outcomes: no changes or some or all changes. If there's no changes recommended, that just means that our best estimate is either identical or very close to what the current assumptions are, and that can happen. There may not be any recommended changes to any of the economic assumptions, and we would state why. If there are changes recommended to one or all of the assumptions, it means that our best estimate is materially different from the current assumptions, meaning it would have an impact on the funding of the plans. It's materially different. It supports a change. Typically, a fiscal impact will also result, unless the change was very small, but usually if it's material, there's going to be a fiscal impact to that. And as we talked about earlier, to manage risk and to make sure we have proper funding of the plans, it's important to maintain reasonable assumptions, and it's required by our standards of practice to make sure the assumptions are reasonable. Even if they're prescribed assumptions in law, we still have to determine whether they're reasonable and comment on that. Even though we might have to use those assumptions because they're prescribed, we still have to determine if they're reasonable and comment on it. And if the current assumptions still remain reasonable, the current assumptions might not be our best estimate, but they might still be within our best estimate range. In other words, they're still reasonable, and we'll comment on that as well. If there are any changes to the recommended, the economic assumptions, those would be incorporated in the next rate-setting valuation, which will be the 2013 valuation, and that impacts 15-17 rates. So right now, we're in a non-rate-setting valuation, so any changes that might be recommended in September to you would go into the 13 valuation for 15-17 rates. So just to wrap up, what's the next steps for the board? We are right now finalizing our analysis and recommendations, and a report will be sent to you. And also we'll be presenting to you in September with all the supporting analysis, data, tables of numbers to come along with that recommendation. And if there are any recommended changes that the board is considering, we would follow up with fiscal impacts to the plan. And at that time, the board would take action to adopt any changes if needed. And that concludes my remarks, and I'd be happy to take any questions you have.
Jeffrey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ma'am, great presentation. I just want to touch on just kind of a brief tangent off topic here. When you're talking about COLAs, looking at this year's numbers, you seem to differentiate a COLA depending upon whether you retired in the first half of the calendar year or the last half of the calendar year, and come up with two completely separate COLAs. Anticipating the answer, could you kind of explain in layman's terms banking and how that would apply to the differentiation?
I might want to defer to DRS on that because I'm not an expert on it. But the basics of it are when inflation is determined, if it exceeds 3%, which is the maximum inflation that's applied in a given year, then that amount in excess of 3% will be banked for a future year when inflation falls below 3%.
Very good.
Is there more that you need to know about that?
I'll follow up off.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Lisa, I just one, is there anything that has been noted yet from the office there about anything that's coming, anything that came out of standards of practice that have been changed just recently that we might see impacting our study here? Is there anything new out there or anything that they're kind of highlighting a little differently than they have in the past?
As far as the economic assumptions, no.
Okay.
Our preliminary analysis is showing that they're, in its preliminary, it's showing that the assumptions all look reasonable that are currently being used for the plans. There will be some changes on the demographic side. Okay. So there are some things coming out regarding improvements in mortality. Those are new in the profession. And another thing we're looking at, too, is credibility analysis as we're doing the demographic experience study, but not as far as the economic.
Okay, one of the things I was curious about was, in particular, we talk about the three issues about general salary increases because we haven't seen those. It seems like it's been pretty stagnant. I think that goes to Mr. Holey's comments there about banking versus, the actual salary increases we've seen. But more importantly, for me now is the rate of investment return. There's been no conversations about reductions in rate of return from the industry.
Not that we're seeing we really base our analysis on the capital market assumptions that the State Investment Board has in place, and they are at this point looking very close to the 7.5% that is currently being used for LEOFF 2.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Comments, Steve? No? Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, we were looking here at the agenda, and because most of our members here either have had a few times or through their experience, the senator and David, in the course of your duties, you have plenty of training with ethics and being a board member, that we were hoping we could, with your consent, defer this to the next meeting where some of our newer members that would require such training talked to our Assistant Attorney General, Don, and we thought it might be better suited for a time when we have some of our newer members in attendance for that training. So we'll defer it to the next meeting with your consent.
Excellent move.
Okay. Don, is that sufficient?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Thank you. Then we'll go to item number 9. Mr. Valencia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, for the record, Tim Valencia, Deputy Director for the Left Plan 2 Retirement Board. This is agenda item 9, the presentation on the new trustee orientation manual. As you'll know that everybody, when you started on the board, you had received some form of the orientation manual. Over the years since we began, it has gone through several modifications over time, this being one of the more complete, reconstructions of the orientation manual. The reason that we redid the orientation manual and the focus was that we'd received a lot of information during the expectation interviews that were conducted last year. In particular, one of those primary expectations that came up and wasn't one of our best ratings was getting you as a board up to speed quickly or getting a new member up to speed quickly. And so we decided to relook at this new orientation manual because that's one of the primary documents. That's one of the first things that a new member gets to see and be introduced to the board with. So in the original forms of the document, it was never taken necessarily from the perspective of getting somebody up to speed quickly. It was more a repository of a bunch of information that's relevant to Left Plan 2. It didn't have a really clear focus on what the manual is trying to accomplish, at least not as the board members had expressed to us during the expectation interviews. So taking the comments, we used your comments specifically to guide us as we were redeveloping all the material. But a secondary focus, it is mostly to get somebody up to speed quickly, as was our primary focus, but we did want it to be a useful ongoing reference for the existing members. So part of that is making sure that it's going to be kept up to date and that relevant information is being added to it as we move along, so that as we add even more members, that everybody's on the same page. So that was the focus of this redevelopment. So what we did with the information was this, is that we redivided a lot of the information that was there and redeveloped some of it into 3 key areas. The first area that you'll find in the manual is a section about your responsibilities, is what we call it, because you know that it's the things that as a board member, the things that that somebody would need to know. I'm now on the board. What is it that I have to do while I'm here? You have a lot of different responsibilities. You have, just as a state board, there are state responsibilities, such as what Don was going to provide training on with open public meetings, ethics, those types of responsibilities. You have statutory responsibilities towards the plan, such as adopting assumptions, contribution rates, actuarial factors. So within all those different duties, we're trying to make sure that somebody coming on new knows exactly what it is that's expected of them, what are the key things that they're going to be there to focus on. The second area then is the plan knowledge. We actually received quite a bit of useful feedback in this particular area of we had some new members last year, and they were able to tell us what kind of information they would have liked to have seen. And so we tried to incorporate quite a bit of that. In particular, we tried to do a much better job of laying out the history of prior to the LEOFF plans, the development of LEOFF and LEOFF Plan 1 and how that led to LEOFF Plan 2 and eventually to the governance piece with the LEOFF Plan 2 board. We also tried to do a better job of incorporating the legislative history in particular for the board, for the plan in general, but in particular, what have been the legislative priorities for the board, such as the funding, and all the work that they did that you've done with disability and survivor benefits, focusing on those weak points in the plan, but also along the way capturing all the legislative accomplishments from the board. So in this case, the plan knowledge really is focusing on if you're a board member, what are the things that you should know that will help you make your decisions. So along with that basic plan information and the board activity, there is information about our plan governance arena in terms of the strategic partners that you work with and that you hear from frequently, so that a new member understands who it is and why they're hearing information from these folks. So we also have some other elements about some of the legal aspects. We tried, rather than trying to get into really deep into some legal precedents and stuff, it's such as most of you have heard the term Balkan House. We provided some information so they understand why that's important to decisions that you're making. Not that you have to be a Balkan House expert, but more so understand how those things may impact the decisions that you're going to make. So that's the kind of information that we upgraded in the plan knowledge section. The third section and the final section is a brand new section that we didn't formally have in the manual before. Pieces of it were involved in the process, but it wasn't really formalized. And what the perspective that we took is, for a new person coming in, what should they expect in terms of participating on the board? So information about what it means for us to be conducting business and to conduct business as a state agency and a board member, on a board of this nature. It has information about the basic things that I wouldn't have necessarily thought of initially, like how do board meetings operate? What's the dress codes for the board meetings? What's our rules of order for the meetings? How how we study issues? What those types of items. It also has all the information about education opportunities and all the forms that you need to fill out, or the information you need to know about arranging for training and education opportunities. So all those administrative pieces that normally would end up happening kind of after somebody got in the fold and would make a call, and Jessica would basically walk them through. Well, now we're going to provide that information up front and in writing, so that then they know just how to go ahead. They know what to expect and how to conduct business on the board. So that's the hopefully that will be a much better use of the information. It will be much more friendly. In that process, we found we were able to pare down the information quite a bit. It was a sizable document before, and that was really tough to read. And so we tried to think of it as a getting started guide rather than a user manual, so to speak. So we tried to pare it down to the front basic information, knowing that once you get going, then we can start to fill in anything that you need to know after that. The last key thing to this is this happened to coincide with an opportunity for new delivery. Since we were looking at moving our meeting process to a paperless environment, we're working on getting this coordinated in this new environment as well. So for right now, today, rather than being, and when we started this project about 6 months ago, the plan was you were going to get a basically a spiral-bound document. Rather, what you're going to get is an electronic document. Now, you already have that because you have your iPads. We have loaded this in your Goodreader. So if you launch your Goodreader, you'll find the new trustee orientation manual. For now, it is a single PDF. But one of the advantages of this environment, whereas before it was all a lot of photocopying and a lot of binding, now when we make updates to this, we'll just be able to upload it to your Goodreader, and you'll have the most current information very quickly at a minimum of cost, because we won't be having to do a bunch of binding and shipping, and there won't be confusion of trying to swap out manuals or anything of that nature. So I think it would be better for everybody. And in fact, I know, since when we wrote this, when we developed it, we're already going to have to give you an update to adjust all our stuff for our new delivery mechanism with the Novus agenda. So that will be coming hopefully in the near future. Now, speaking of the future, what our vision is for this. Right now, it's just a PDF document, and you'd have to scroll through the PDF document. What the future will be as we move a little bit further into this electronic environment is that this will become a web-based type document. So it'll look and feel much more like a web page. You'll be able to navigate through it in a web-type fashion. And the other advantage of that type of an environment is that for outside reference materials, you'll be able to link and go to those locations. Like if you wanted to see something from one of our stakeholders, you'd be able to go to the Department of Retirement Systems website right from your iPad, or you could go out to one of the other strategic partners, or if there's a piece of information we had referenced that we had a citation to, you'd be able to go out to that. So that will just further enhance the information delivery through this particular vehicle. So that is your introduction and presentation of our new and updated trustee orientation manual. I hope you will take the opportunity to take a look at it. We absolutely, along with all the expectation interviews that we're currently conducting at any point, as you're looking through this, if there's still information you think that should be in there, or that you yourself would find helpful now, give us a call. Let us know. We're always looking to make improvements on this material to help you do your job better. So, with that, that's all my remarks. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to address that.
I do, Tim. Hang on just a sec. Trying to navigate here and go back and forth. Okay, looking here at page 3 of your document.
On the presentation?
Yes. As I went through this and looked at the other board orientation things that I've experienced, not been subjected to, but experienced. What do we do now? My recollection is a little bit of some ethics background and board responsibilities with the Assistant Attorney General that's assigned to the LEOFF board. Do we have any kind of an orientation that would have our new board members maybe come down to the office and spend about, all the things you just talked about, maybe go over all those things, whether it's 4, maybe 6 hours of, walking through a lot of the documents that I was just looking through the orientation manual. It'd be nice, I think, if given, I know there's certain restrictions on certain members, but that opportunity for them to go through that. I know that the State Investment Board does something very familiar or similar to that. And we could even be remote with that. You don't actually have to be here in the building to do that, but you could even go to location with some of our board members, even the new board members, and sit down with them and be able to have an interaction there. They can have the materials up front on the web-based and develop their own questions. And I'd like to suggest that we consider that option.
Yeah, that was feedback we got in the expectation interviews related to new board members in particular regarding get us up to speed quickly. And so we will be working on some initiatives to improve that new board member orientation, and we'll use, we'll have at least one new board member to use as a guinea pig this interim. So
Yeah, what I would
comments
think
are
is
timely.
you could get, somebody from perhaps, 30 minutes with the Office of the State Actuary, just enough to get you very confused about how the system works. And then maybe a little time with somebody from DRS and from the AAG, and then our staff. I think it'd be, I don't know, the expectation you'd be up to speed, I think, is widely overachieving, but at least you get, as much as you want to get out of it.
Indoctrinated.
Yeah, and as you said, that,
Strategic planning.
yeah, as the process was originally designed, at least when we first started, there usually was a meeting with the AG, and then there would be a meeting with at least a staff person, and would be some communications of information. But yeah, as you said, we did have feedback, and that had prompted the ideas for reevaluating that entire process. This was the very first step, and then the next, and that's also even part of the reason we talked to Don about rescheduling some new training. We thought that there might be some new board members, and some of the newer members would be a good refresher. But yeah, I absolutely agree that expanding those to our strategic partners and involving them in that process will make a significant improvement in getting somebody up to speed. So we will be looking at those as part of the evaluation of this program.
Yeah, and it's been, for me, much easier being a resident of this community here to have access to all of that information, to be able to stop by here and talk with Steve, talk with the state actuary, talk to DRS. I mean, I have those opportunities to do that everybody else probably doesn't have just by proximity, but it's how you really pick up on the nuances of what we do here. Oh, Dave.
Yeah, I would agree with all that's been said here. Is that orientation as one of the newer members? I really appreciate the staff responding to that and making sure that the next board members are brought on board. I would suggest that carpooling with a long-term board member is a great way of education. So I appreciate Pat doing his term. So if I don't know if I have to go to the Eastern Washington and carpool over with other people, but yeah. So. But that orientation part is really critical, and I think we've talked to actually in the one-on-one conversations is how do we keep that orientation and keep up to speed, especially during the legislative session when we're not meeting other opportunities. Especially in technology, are there ways that breaking up that 6 hours of orientation into video training? Like one example in my organization, we did a 3-day training and people wanted to hear about it, but it's going to be hard for us to get all 350 of my employees through that training. And so we're breaking it up into YouTube segments, 5-10 minutes at a time. And so that they can do on their, is trying to keep everyone informed about what we're doing. I think those are kind of nice. Other technology allows those kind of things.
Okay, any other comments? All right, well, thank you, Tim. Hope that's food for thought there for the staff.
Absolutely. Great feedback.
Okay, item number 10, the last page of your packet, or on your iPad, agenda items for future meetings is linked there. Item number 11. Our next meeting is on the 28th of August.
I would like to point out, Mr. Chair and board members, earlier as you were discussing moving the new member orientation, you did say to the next meeting. However, because the August agenda is fairly full, with your indulgence, we may look to see whether it would be more appropriate to schedule that training for either the September meeting or even potentially as a piece of the October offsite.
Oh, that might be
But,
better.
but we'll look into that in terms of availability and what else is going on. But with your acceptance, I'd just say it may not necessarily happen at the August meeting.
I think as long as Dawn is there, we're probably pretty flexible, huh?
I think if you do it at the October meeting, it's a little less formal and people could ask more questions.
Okay.
That sort of thing.
Great, okay. Well, we try to direct it and target it for October then.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll follow up with Dawn, and we'll figure out between October and September. So.
Okay, any last comments there, Steve, or directions?
No, again, the August meeting includes all 6 of the items that you identified at the June meeting that you wanted to work on in this interim. And you'll have initial considerations on all of them. I know not all of you will be able to attend the August meeting, and so either before or shortly after that meeting, we want to make sure that we have outreach to all board members so that you're up to speed, feel fully up to speed on all of those issues, because the rest of the interim will happen very quickly. The October offsite is probably not going to cover any policy issues, so you'll be between August and then maybe a few of these in September and then a follow-up in November. It'll be kind of fast and furious. It'll be a compressed interim, I guess, is a good way to put it. And there's going to be a lot of ground covered at the August meeting.
Yeah, I have one question here. How does our August 28th agenda dovetail with our interaction with the SCPP? Are we?
The SCPP will not be meeting in August. And so you will have initial presentations, and then we'll get some direction from you perhaps on some of these issues as soon as August in terms of where you want to go with some of them, whether you want to pursue them further or not, for instance. And then I believe the September meeting, I'll be asked to inform the SCPP again about what you're working on and answer questions they may have about topics that you're working on. All 6 of the items that you identified, in some respect or another, have some potential overlap, either with other plans or with similar efforts that the SCPP may be considering. So theoretically, any of those 6 could be a topic for coordination. Again, at least at their first sort of opening meeting yesterday, they didn't take any formal action to move to coordinate on any of those. So right now it's a bit hard to answer in terms of where you guys are at with respect to coordinating with the SCPP. Glenn Olson is on the SCPP. Marcy Frost is on the SCPP. So there are at least 2 select committee members who are very familiar with what the Left 2 board is working on.
Okay. All right, any other questions? All right, go to the order. Okay, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And we are, oh yeah. And we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.